Welcome to Ichiraku Ramen, and thank you for joining me for another journey into the world of Shinobi. Before we begin, I want to give a huge thank you to everyone who listens, supports the channel, and enjoys these stories. Today's story is part 7 of Namikaze's return. Following the devastating failure of the Sasuke Retrieval Mission, a fire is lit inside Naruto. When Jiraiya takes him away from the village for a 3-year training trip, Naruto drops the dead last act and gets serious. No more shortcuts, no more goofing off. Driven to protect his precious people and uncover the secrets Konoha actively denied him, Naruto dives deep into the true shinobi arts. Under Jiraiya's intense guidance, he doesn't just master his chakra, he masters the legendary Hiraishin, flying thunder god. When an overpowered, highly skilled Naruto finally returns to the Leaf Village, the Akatsuki and the rest of the shinobi world won't know what hit them. Lemon's warning. This story contains lemon scenes for mature audiences. This is a fan-made story inspired by the world of Naruto. All characters in the original universe belong to their respective creators. This narration is created for entertainment purposes as part of a transformative storytelling experience. The story itself was written by the Engulfing silence, and full credit goes to the original author. If you would like to read the original version, the link to the story is included in the video description below. If you like my content and want to keep up with future updates, hit that subscribe button and don't forget leave a like if you enjoyed the video. It not only helps me but helps with YouTube algorithm. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Chapter 25. Battle for Kumogakure. Fire was everywhere. Great conflagrations that devoured the ruined remains of buildings and the corpses that littered the streets. Many buildings had long since collapsed, either from the explosions of the Asura path, or crushed under the foot of the animal path summon. What few buildings had not been turned into rubble and debris looked like a stiff wind would cause them to collapse on themselves. The amount of damage pain had unleashed upon Kumogakure in such a short amount of time was as astonishing as it was widespread. Only a few areas of the village had been left pristine. The few sectors that had been lucky enough not to have one of the 6 paths make landfall in them. "Everyone hurry!" shouted one of the many Chunin-level shinobi that littered the ranks of Kumogakure's ninja corps. He was waving his hands to go with his actions, directing the numerous civilians that were running frightened through the streets. Working with him were several other shinobi, all of them Chunin as well. "Quickly, this way. We need to get all of you to the shelters." It was easy to see the terrified expressions on the civilians' faces. It was even easier to understand why. While everyone knew of the possibility of the village they lived in being invaded by an outside force due to its status as a hidden village, none of the citizens ever thought it would happen. And why should they? Kumogakure was the most militarized village of the 5 great nations. They may not produce shinobi of such quality that they become legends every generation like Konohagakure did, but they had more ninja than any other village out there. The idea that someone would attack their village was laughable. No one was laughing now. As the Chunin directed the civilians to the shelters that had been erected inside of the very mountain range their village was built on, a dozen of the village's elite Jonin were doing everything in their power to defeat the 4-headed dog that had been summoned into their midst. Barring that, they were at least hoping to draw the summoned animal away from the civilians so they would be able to flee the scene. Both of these tasks were much easier said than done. Whatever kind of summon this 4-headed dog was, it was incredibly durable. Kunai were too small to do any real damage. Close-range weapons like swords were out of the question as well. One ninja tried to be brave and close the distance by jumping on its back so he could stab it with his katana. He paid the price for his hubris by being eaten alive by one of its 4 heads. Originally, the dog had only had 3 heads, but during one ninja's attack where he had blasted it with a powerful lightning jutsu, the dog had grown an extra head. They weren't sure if that meant lightning jutsu aided it or if this was just some kind of freak accident, but they had become wary of blasting it with any lightning jutsu below a rank. "Please remain calm and follow us." The Chunin continued directing his charges across the damaged village. They could not move very quickly. Even running as fast as they could, civilians were notoriously slow. At least compared to shinobi. "We're getting you all to shelter. Please remain calm and look out." Ultimately, it was the slowness of the civilians that led to their demise. A stray jutsu managed to hit the dog in one of its eyes, perhaps its one weakness. This led to the giant summons stumbling right into a building, one which led directly to the roadway that the civilians and Chunin were using to reach the shelters. The civilians were all killed when the debris and rubble of the now destroyed building came crashing down on top of them. Their screams were the last thing the ninja helping direct them heard before they were crushed by several tons of cement. The Chunin was killed when he jumped out of the way, just barely missing getting crushed by the large amount of rubble, only to get crushed under the large paw of the dog summon. When the dog summons lifted its paw off the ground again, it revealed the Chunin's body twisted in an unnatural shape, his head bent at an angle that should not be possible. Samui tried not to lose her cool as she watched the giant four-headed dog kill a large number of civilians and Chunin like they were nothing. There weren't many things in this world that were worse than seeing your comrades getting slaughtered like they were animals. The knowledge that she could do nothing to stop this monster as it continued destroying and killing everything in its path only made Samui feel that much more useless. Her feelings were made even worse by the number of corpses that littered the ground. Civilian corpses, not shinobi. These were not hardened warriors prepared to face death at any second, but innocent lives who have never known the true hardships ninja went through every day. Damn it, Karui swore as she saw the same thing Samui and their other teammates saw as they traveled through the streets, trying to avoid the summon's gaze and the debris it threw in all directions as it crashed through one building after another. What the hell is everyone else doing? Why aren't they trying to stop this thing? And just where the fuck are the kami be damned Anbu? They're probably being held up by whoever is causing those explosions. Always the thinker, Omoi was the one who came up with the most reasonable explanation. I doubt whoever summoned that dog is alone. It wouldn't surprise me if there was a small group that had managed to infiltrate our village and is causing as much havoc as they can. You also have to account for the fact that it's only been about 15 minutes since this thing's been summoned, Samui added with a frown. Her eyes darted left and right, constantly shifting as she kept wary of her surroundings just in case they ran into the one who summoned that dog. The Anbu will take time to mobilize, especially since one of the first buildings that was destroyed was the Anbu headquarters. After hearing this, Karui summed all of their thoughts nicely. Shit. In any case, we need to find the person who summoned this thing. If we can find them, we should be able to make them reverse the summoning. Right, you don't have to tell me twice. The search for the summoner continued. Whoever had summoned that thing was very skilled in stealth. Neither Samui nor her two squad mates could find hide or hair of the person responsible for that creature's appearance. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack, made even worse by the fact that Samui was not even sure of what the needle was supposed to look like. It was a frustrating turn of events to say the least. The trio quickly ran into one of the many alleys that dotted the once pristine village, just barely dodging the giant dog's attention. They were getting closer and closer to the summon now, which was making it more difficult to keep from being spotted. The only reason they had not been seen yet was due to the many shinobi that were still trying to ineffectively take the thing down with lightning jutsu. Speaking of, now that they were closer, Samui could see the lightning jutsu being hurled at the summon. It looked like those jonin were going all out. There wasn't a ninjutsu below a rank being thrown at that thing. Everything from lances and spears made of lightning to dragons and other animals composed of the lightning element were being launched at the summon to absolutely no effect. It was like the thing didn't even feel the pain it should be in. What was going on here? That summon should at least be getting aggravated. Why was it just shrugging off the attacks like they were nothing? Better yet, how was it able to shrug off so many jutsu so easily? Were the attacks just too weak to do anything? Perhaps they needed a jutsu above a rank to truly damage it? As if the shinobi attacking the dog summon had been thinking the same thing, several moved in to distract the creature while a half a dozen jumped onto the roofs, their hands already running the gauntlet of seals for a collaboration jutsu. After they ran through all the hand seals needed, the group called out the name of their technique simultaneously. Samui could not hear what the name of the jutsu was over all the noise near them, but she could see the effects, see the stream of what was obviously lightning chakra coalescing and shooting off of each shinobi before all the jutsu clashed in the center and grew even larger. The jutsu unleashed from the combined efforts of the ninja was massive in size. A giant dragon made of spiraling lightning with glowing red eyes that towered over the four-headed dog. It looked like a giant tornado made out of pure lightning that managed to form cohesion and took the shape of a dragon. Even from the distance she was at, Samui could see the way the chakras spiraled around a central axis like that of a tornado. Samui knew what the technique was. Reiryu no Tatsumaki, an A-rank ninjutsu when used by a single Jonin-level shinobi. As a collaboration jutsu it was probably above S rank. If nothing else it made for an impressive sight. The four-headed dog's snarl was drowned out by the dragon's roar, an earth-shattering sound that shook the very heavens. The powerful roar seemed to carry to all corners of the village and echo for several long seconds after the massive lightning beast finished. And then the giant collaboration lightning jutsu surged forward. The four-headed dog summon was given no time to do anything, much less move, as the massive lightning dragon smashed into with the fury of a thunderstorm combined with a tornado. What happened next was an incredible explosion of epic proportions. Lightning exploded outwards in all directions from where the jutsu struck as a giant sphere of swirling blue energy engulfed the summon in its light. The sight was so bright that Samui and her two teammates had to cover their eyes lest they be blinded. When the light died down and it was safe to look again, the trio did so and gasped at the sight before them. Well, Karui gasped. Omoi did too. Samui just stared with a slight widening of her eyes, but you could tell she was just as shocked as her companions. And why wouldn't she be? The place where the dog summons had been was gone. What had once been a bustling city street before the fighting broke out was now nothing more than a large crater. Samui couldn't judge just how large the crater was, but she estimated it to be at least several dozen meters in diameter. Whoa, Karui muttered in shocked awe. That is one big hole. Omoi didn't really have anything to add, so he just nodded. It looks like they destroyed the summon, Samui noted coolly. Of course, being who she was, everything she said was often spoken in a cool and collected tone, even when she was near the point of freaking out. I doubt there's anything that could have survived such a concentrated assault. And she was right. Such an intense and powerful offensive assault was enough to defeat even the four-headed dog summon. It hadn't even been given the chance to split itself before being forced to dispel from the several 100 million volts of electricity traveling through it. That didn't mean they were out of the woods yet. Several dozen meters from Team Samui's location, another large burst of smoke appeared to hover over destroyed and burned-out buildings. And from that cloud of smoke a giant centipede with a dark black carapace and orange-colored skin underneath that shot out. Like the four-headed dog, this summon also had the Rinnegan, as well as a number of body piercings, including one that went straight through the center of its head. Almost as soon as the giant centipede was summoned, did the thing go on a rampage. Rearing its head back, the monstrous summon crashed itself straight through one of the still-standing buildings it was near. Debris and rubble were soon flung in all directions. Several of the larger chunks smashed against walls that, due to already being weakened under the strain of having the four-headed dog destroy much of the structure already, toppled down as the rest was building collapsed from having nothing left to support it. Samui turned back to look at her two teammates, a cool look in her eyes. Come on, right. The trio dashed out of the alley and into the street proper. Deciding to forego stealth in favor of getting to whoever had summoned that centipede before they could disappear, Team Samui blasted down the street as quickly as they could go, their legs nothing more than a blur as they ran. It was this lack of discretion that led to them never reaching their intended target. It started when Samui felt a very mild yet powerful burst of killing intent directed at her and her teammates. The intent was so subtle that the only reason she sensed it at all was because she was a Jonin-level kunoichi. That was the only warning she got before a presence appeared from above them. Move it, you two, Samui ordered her squad mates as she followed her own words with actions. Tucking forward into a shoulder roll, the blonde-haired Jonin traveled across the ground quickly just as whoever she had sensed landed on the place she had been with a loud smash that seemed to shake the ground. Spinning about, Samui reached behind her and grabbed the tanto strapped horizontally across her back. Her two teammates landed on either side of her, Karui on her left and Omoi on the right. Both had their weapons drawn. Unlike Samui, who preferred using a tanto, a short blade made more for stabs and thrusts than slashes, Omoi and Karui utilized long blades. The blades were not quite at the length of a nodashi, a long sword that was usually just as tall as a person, but they were definitely longer than your average katana. Other than their longer than average length, they were fairly standard looking blades. Nothing at all special about them. With their weapons out and ready to be brought down on whoever had just attacked them, the trio of shinobi glared at the dust cloud that had been created by whatever made impact with the ground. The thing, for whatever this was, could not be human, before them was incredibly unusual. It looked human enough, except that it had no neck to speak of and a large piercing on its chin to go along with the numerous other piercings all over its face. Its eyes were purple, both the iris and sclera, and running around the eyes was a ripple pattern. The thing that Samui noticed the most aside from the eyes was its cloak, black with red clouds. Akatsuki? Samui narrowed her eyes. So these were the people after B-sensei, Yugito and Naruto. They must either be supremely confident in themselves or incredibly arrogant to attack them up front like this. So these are those Akatsuki assholes? Karui looked at the thing incredulously. I knew they had to have some issues, but I hadn't realized these people would be so damn freaky looking. We should handle this guy with caution, Omoi suggested. Given that he's attacked the village, even if it was done out of arrogance, he must be assured that he has enough power to back up his assault. Or maybe he's just some kind of distraction and the real mastermind is already heading over to where B-sensei is. Whatever, Karui scoffed. If this idiot thinks he and his goons can really take on the full might of Kumo, I say let him. We'll crush him and his friends like bugs. Samui frowned as she listened to her teammates. Something told her this battle would not be that easy. Still, she prepared for a fight all the same. This was so not cool. The shinobi of Kumogakure were having a very difficult time with this new summoned creature. It was bad enough that they just barely managed to kill the last one, which had cost 6 of them almost all of their chakra to destroy. Now they had to deal with one that seemed even more difficult to kill than that 4-headed dog. Nothing they had thrown at it worked so far. The centipede was impervious to lightning release attacks. At least, nothing they've attacked it with did anything more than mildly irritate it. Not even chakra flow, channeling lightning chakra through their swords, did anything more than leave light nicks on the giant monster's carapace. One of them had managed to take out one of the creature's many legs, but he had also lost his life in the process. Since then, those few brave ninja who tried ended up losing their lives long before they could even reach the summoned beast. It was almost like the thing was learning the more they fought it. How were they supposed to beat something like this? Something they couldn't even damage? Kumo Ryu Kangiri, cloud-style flame beheading. Descending from above, a man with blonde hair and holding a sword that was imbued with fire nature chakra above his head slashed at the centipede summon's left eye. While the carapace that he hid did not even crack or glow red from the heat, the eye was soft and the blade that had been lit aflame easily sliced through it. There was a loud sizzling sound as the eye burst open like an overripe fruit. The intense heat caused the light-receptive organ to not only explode, but evaporate all of the liquid located inside of the eye itself. The centipede summoned let out a loud shriek of pain as it reared its head back. Atsui jumped off just as the giant centipede began shaking its head back and forth, bashing it against the buildings around it and destroying them with impunity. Now that was a hot attack. The man shouted. Now that he wasn't a falling blur, he was more easily discernible than before. The man who shouted in exuberance had shoulder-length blonde hair that was being worn in an asymmetrical bowl cut. His eyes were green and he was wearing a sleeveless version of the typical attire a Jonin of Kumogakure wore. The only real difference aside from the sleeveless shirt was that he was also wearing shin guards, bandages around his forearms and the kanji for netsu, heat, tattooed onto his left shoulder. How do you like that? The man continued. It was clear he was reveling in his sense of having managed to damage the giant summon while everyone else was struggling. Equally clear was that he had no real trouble gloating over his supposed victory. Was it too hot for you to handle? Atsui-senpai. That's right. Atsui grinned largely as the other shinobi stared at him in awe or surprise. Some of them may have also been deadpanning. Not that he noticed this, busy as he was showboating for everyone. It is I, the man with fire in his veins. Don't come near me or you might get burned by how hot I am. The amount of stares his introduction got was numerous. Even the summons was staring at him with its one good eye. Kachiyose no jutsu. Unfortunately for him, and everyone else, there was someone who was not staring at him. The one who had summoned the giant centipede. Even more unfortunate, this person decided that the best response to make to Atsui's declaration would be to summon more animals to fight. Kachiyose no jutsu. Two more large bursts of smoke exploded into existence. Like the after effects of a nuclear explosion, the white smoke formed two large mushrooms' heads that expanded far into the sky before being blown away by a strong breeze. When the smoke finally cleared, everyone got a sight of what had been summoned to fight them. They promptly wished they hadn't. The first of the summons was actually one that flew out of the first cloud and smoke and into the air. It was a giant drill-beaked bird. It was an incredibly unusual-looking animal as it not only displayed a prominent and jagged beak that looked similar to a drill, but it also had three distinct legs, two located horizontally on either side of its body and one below, as well as three wings. Like all the summons of the animal path, the bird had Rinnegan eyes. The bird summon screeched a loud, horrible-sounding shriek that echoed across the village and forced Atsui and the other shinobi near it to hold their ears in pain. Gritting his teeth, Atsui could barely restrain a grimace at the loud noise. His hands were beginning to feel wet, a sure sign that the ear-splitting screech had actually managed to damage his eardrums enough to cause internal bleeding. That was not good. Looking up, he was just in time to see the large bird summons dive bombing them. The giant avian swooped in like some kind of demented bird of prey, leveling out only after it was hovering just a few feet over the village. It was close enough that the discharge of air from its flight destroyed several buildings. Then it began to lay eggs. Atsui found himself blinking along with all the other shinobi as hundreds of eggs fell out of the bird summon's backside. The eggs, strange yellow eggs with white spots, attached themselves to every surface available. Not just the ground but the walls of buildings as well. Several landed near Atsui. What was this? Some kind of strange ninjutsu? Perhaps the eggs contained a poison that would be released when they broke. Or maybe they would birth more birds? That's what usually happened when eggs hatched, right? It only took Atsui a second after the eggs around him began glowing to realize that whatever they did, he did not want to stick around to find out. Atsui jumped into the air in order to avoid the eggs, which had covered every viable surface on the ground. Just in time too. Several seconds after he became airborne, the eggs all exploded. Many of Atsui's comrades did not get away in time and were caught in the blast. Those who did manage to get far enough away from the explosions were forced to watch as their friends were annihilated in a hailstorm of fire, their bodies disappearing as they were reduced to naught but ash. Landing on the ground after the explosion ceased, Atsui and the other ninja of Kumogakure wondered how they were going to deal with this monstrosity. Already the giant avian was coming for another pass, this time with what looked like some kind of dust storm with lightning billowing inside of it trailing behind. It wouldn't matter. Many of these ninja would not get another chance to attack the bird summon anyways, for at that moment the second summon made itself known. Stampeding out of the second cloud of smoke as it busted down anything and everything in its path was a large rhinoceros. If the bird summons was large, then the rhino was gigantic on a scale that could compete with the Biju. It easily towered over everything around it. Not only was it tall, but it also possessed a lot of mass. From the sharp-looking horn on its head to the long tail that swayed behind it like some kind of pendulum, the giant summons had to be at least 6, maybe 10 times the length of the average building in Kumo. With its mottled, leathery gray skin and what looked almost like dark gray armor, the rhino was easily visible amongst the cement bricks that exploded in all directions in its wake. Its large hoofed feet pounded on the ground, creating large craters each time it moved. The earth seemed to tremble under its weight. The earth was shaking so violently that Atsui, along with his comrades, were forced to send chakra to the bottom of their feet to keep from falling over. Not that this did any real good. The rhino had started charging them the moment the group of ninja landed on the ground. It plowed through several buildings, smashing its way across the village in its effort to run them over. As things stood, Atsui was just barely able to get out of the way by making quick use of the kawarimi to substitute himself with a rock. Many of his comrades did the same thing, substituting themselves with the debris around them to avoid getting trampled by the monstrous-looking rhino. A few of the chunin were not so lucky. One of them had been going through the hand signs for the kawarimi, but the shaking earth from the rhino's charge had knocked his hands out of place, forcing him to remake the hand seals. He had not been fast enough, and he had paid the price when the rhino's large horn gutted him. The chunin died quickly, bleeding out as the horn went straight through his stomach and came out of his back, its length stained red with blood that glinted in the sunlight. With a violent shake of its head, the rhino threw the corpse off its horn. The body flew through the air and landed on the rubble from one of the many destroyed buildings. Damn it, this is getting even hotter than I expected. Atsui was not very pleased with this turn of events. They had managed to get rid of the dog and the centipede, but now they were facing two summons and he had no idea how to deal with these ones. That rhino looked very durable. Would jutsu even work on it? And what about that bird? It looked like it attacked mostly from a distance if one were to judge by the jutsu it used. Most lightning-styled ninjutsu were short to mid-range attacks due to the fact that the lightning had to travel through air or wind, and would dissipate after a certain amount of time unless someone kept it going with a constant stream of chakra. Most people did not have the reserves to keep a lightning jutsu from dissipating. Atsui wished he had a summons of his own. Only something as large as a boss summon could deal with something like this without exhausting itself. It was unfortunate, but while Konoha was known for having powerful summons such as toads, slugs and monkeys, Kumo was not known for possessing any summoning contracts. That pretty much meant they were shit out of luck. Life was so unfair sometimes. It was like one of those old Western standoffs. It was a clear day, mostly, if one ignored the cloud of dust and dirt that blocked out the sun at times. The roads were deserted, sort of. There were no people around besides them at least, just the bodies of those who had died. And the hero and the villain were standing just several meters away from each other in a stare-down of epic proportions. All the signs of an epic standoff were present. I'm simply saying we should approach this guy with caution. He's a member of Akatsuki. There's no telling what kind of tricks he has up his sleeve. For all you know, he could be hiding a mechanical body under that cloak. Or maybe he can launch explosives from his hand or something. What would we even be able to do if he had a mechanical body? That's why we need to attack. So long as we don't give the bastard the opportunity to do anything, he can't attack us. Now quit talking, idiot. We're in the middle of battle. If one discounted the fact that the hero had two bickering sidekicks by her side. You two, stop fighting. Samui sighed. Really, she wished these two would just give it a rest at least once. It's not cool. As if her words were magic, the two instantly shut up and got back into their combat stances as if they had never been fighting in the first place. Their attention snapped back into focus and was redirected towards the Akatsuki member who, for some unfathomable reason, had decided to let the two's antics play out. It was easy to see from their stances that Omoi's and Karui's styles were opposites yet complementary in every way. Omoi preferred to take a wide stance with his feet spread apart and knees bent at an angle. He kept his blade sheathed, with his left hand gripping the hilt to ready it for a quick draw. On the opposite end of the spectrum was Karui's narrow stance, her feet coming together and legs straight. Her katana was unsheathed, both hands were on the hilt, which was being held in front of her in a very basic kenjutsu stance that was reminiscent of the samurai from Tetsu no Kuni, the Land of Iron. Samui would have shaken her head at how the two seemed to complement each other so well, were it not for the fact that they were about to fight for their lives. The standoff did not last very long after the two got themselves in gear. A strong wind rustled through the clearing, kicking up dust and a few leaves that moved into their path. That was the unspoken signal as both Karui and Omoi charged from either side of Samui and made their way towards the strange-looking man. The man before them responded quickly, but not in the way anyone likely expected. Twisting his head to the left, Samui, Karui and Omoi watched in shock as the skin bulged before another face, one that was identical to the original face except it was smiling, formed on the left side of its head. This was followed by the same thing happening to the right, only that face was frowning. The man then threw off his cloak, revealing a horrifying surprise underneath. What looked like a man was actually a machine of some kind. It had 6 arms with what looked like bolts on the shoulders and a large, serrated blade-like sash around its waist that almost looked like a tail. Seeing what this thing looked like underneath that cloak for the first time had the members of Team Samui pause. Holy shit, Karui swore as she jumped back to gain some distance between her and the machine. That is one ugly son of a bitch. Said ugly son of a bitch seemed to take offense to that. At least, that's what it looked like. Gripping one of his forearms, a loud clicking sound preceded the thing's wrist detaching from the rest of his arm with only a thick line of metal with several rockets attached to its side. This doesn't look good, Omoi murmured as the Asura path pointed his arm at them. With a hiss of smoke and fire, the many dozens of rockets launched from their places and flew towards the trio of Kumo shinobi. Samui swore as she, Karui and Omoi jumped away to avoid the barrage of explosives. This didn't help them much as the missiles followed them wherever they ran, forcing the group to split off and divide the missiles between them. Karui and Omoi took to the roofs and went in opposite directions. Nearly a dozen missiles followed them, and the two were soon forced to dodge and weave across the rooftops, keeping one step ahead of the missiles as they impacted against the roofs and exploded. In the meantime, Samui used the distraction the two gave to charge forward and close the distance between her and the Asura path. It was a risky venture, moving so close to an opponent whose abilities were still very much a mystery. But it wasn't like there was much else she could do. If she wanted to find out what her opponent was capable of, the only way to do that would be to engage this strange being in combat. Despite her intentions, Samui found herself unprepared when the Asura path was blasted forward at incredible speeds from chakra propulsion jets activating on the bottom of its feet. Samui only had enough time to get her tanto up before the serrated blade tried to bifurcate her. A loud squeal of metal on metal erupted from where tanto met serrated blade. Sparks flew between the two weapons, but only for an instant, as the Asura path overpowered Samui seconds after the two clashed. With a grunt of shock, Samui was sent skidding several feet backwards. Gritting her teeth, she channeled chakra to the bottom of her feet in order to maintain her balance and hopefully stop herself from moving too far. She succeeded, only to look up just in time to see one of the Asura path's fists detach from its arm and come flying towards her like one of those segmented rockets he shot at Karui and Omoi. Eyes widening, Samui made to raise her tanto to deflect the fist, even though she knew she would not make it in time. Fortunately, she did not have to. Kumo Ryu Mikazukagiri, Cloud-style 3 days moon beheading. Omoi rushed in from the left, his sword sliding out from its sheath at lightning speeds. Gripping the blade with both hands, he swung the sword in a single, large, crescent moon-shaped arc that occurred at such velocity that the sword actually seemed to form a blurring streak that made the crescent shape of Omoi's weapon visible. His target was the hand that had just been launched. Most people would probably not be capable of slicing through such a small and fast-moving object. But Omoi was trained by Killer Bee, the resident Jinchuriki and one of the few ninja who had truly mastered swordsmanship. Something like this was well within his capabilities. The blade quickly and efficiently sliced straight through the middle of the hand, cutting it in half to reveal the steel and cables underneath. With its circuitry destroyed, the propulsion jets that kept the hand moving forward at such incredible speed sputtered and died. The two halves then separated, one falling down to the ground immediately, the other continuing on as momentum carried it and blowing a small hole through the wall that was miraculously still standing even though the rest of the building was not. The wall collapsed several seconds afterwards, as if the hole had been the final straw that broke the camel's back. Just seconds after Omoi managed to slice the flying hand in half, Karui descended upon the Asura path with the vengeance of a fallen angel. Her sword pointed straight down as she was set to impale the mechanized villain. "Take this, you bastard." Unfortunately for Karui, the Asura path was already reacting to her presence. 4 small triangle-shaped segments split and peel back from his head, revealing the metal underneath the false skin along with a large hole. Blue light began gathering around the hole. It was only after a few seconds of watching the light gather there that Samui realized what was happening. "Karui, get out of there." The warning given, Karui did not waste any time and began making several hand seals. It was difficult when one of her hands was gripping her sword, but she made do, completing the last hand seal just in time for what came next. There was no real warning when the cannon on top of the Asura path's head went off. One moment it was building up enough chakra to destroy several buildings, the next there was a large blast of energy that shot from its head and exploded. The light engulfed Karui's form until nothing of her could be seen. When the light died down, there was nothing above the Asura path. Everything had been obliterated. Kumo Ryu Omotegiri, Cloud-style front beheading. Appearing in front of the Asura path, Karui swung her sword in a single, quick and powerful cutting motion. The attack would have taken the Asura path's head off, had it not been for the powerful-looking serrated blade launching itself forward and knocking her sword aside. With her sword knocked away but her momentum not halted, Karui stumbled forward. It was the perfect opening for the Asura path, who did not hesitate to waste this opportunity. The blade moved to bisect the dark-skinned Kunoichi. Asura had every intention of ending her life right then and there. He would have too, had the blade not been blocked by another sword appearing from his left. There was a loud clang as metal struck against metal, followed by a squeal as the two weapons ground against each other. Omoi's teeth were grit as he channeled chakra into his feet to keep from getting sent flying. He didn't know how such an unusual weapon that did not appear to be all that sturdy, it bends far too much, could be so strong. It was like getting hit with a several thousand-pound brick. Still, he did what he could to keep the serrated tail blade from moving. Out of the three of them, he was physically the strongest. While blocking and locking this attack into place was hard, it was not impossible for someone who had been forced to block Killer Bee's sword attacks during training. Dashing forward, Samui made her presence known as she began using chakra flow to channel lightning-natured chakra through her tanto. The blade was soon wreathed in blue lightning that crackled and popped as it skittered across the metal surface. With the serrated blade already occupied, there wasn't much it could do against Samui as she reached the machine path. Kumo Ryu Raitoku, cloud-style lightning thrust. Keeping her body low to the ground, Samui thrust her lightning-coated weapon forward, hoping to pierce this thing's head. It was not to be. While the serrated blade may have been neutralized by Omoi, the Asura path still had 5 arms it could use. Which it did use. One of the 3 hands on its right side came up and grabbed onto the blade, heedless of the electricity that was not coursing through its body. While that hand moved the blade off to the side, forcing Samui to stumble forward, another hand came up to stare into Samui's face. Kawain no Haya, flaming arrow of amazing ability. Samui had just enough time to realize her mistake before the fist was detached from the arm and launched at her. The fist struck her with such force that it felt like all the bones in her head had caved into her face. She had never felt anything as excruciating as this before. And then she was sent flying backwards with enough force that her body became nothing more than a blur before it crashed straight through a building. Samui, her 2 teammates yelled out in unison. Not that they could do much more than yell, for once Samui had been taken care of, the Asura path turned its attention on them. Almost too quick for them to follow, the Asura path had 2 of its 5 remaining arms pointed at them. They only had enough time to register this before the fists were detached and sent flying. Omoi was hit in the chest, his entire ribcage collapsing in on itself while the hand going after Karui went straight through her stomach, leaving a bloody trail in its wake as it exited her back. The last thing either of them saw before their world went black was the Asura path's head splitting open again to reveal the chakra cannon gathering energy to finish them off. Atsui was beginning to wonder if this situation wasn't getting too hot for them to handle. They had a giant bird creating lightning storms and dropping egg bombs on them, a giant rhino that was rampaging through the streets and destroying everything that the centipede and dog didn't. And that was on top of the new summons that had come out of the woodworks, a giant ox. That's right, a giant bison with thick brown fur, multiple piercings located throughout its body, the largest damn horns he had ever seen, in the same odd ripple-patterned eyes as every other summon they had been dealing with so far. It had appeared about 5 minutes after the Anbu had shown up to try and subdue the other summons and subsequently wiped out most of the Anbu by squashing them flat when it had been summoned. Now there were only 3 Anbu left of the 4 squads that had arrived. Things really weren't looking too hot for them right now. The bird is coming back. As the cry went up, Atsui looked up into the sky and swore. The bird was coming back, and not only was it laying eggs, but that lightning storm was behind it as well. He hadn't even known that thing could create 2 different attacks at once. Everybody scatter. That sounded like a fine idea to Atsui. He had no desire to stay in the line of fire from that thing. He had already seen numerous examples of how deadly that bird could be firsthand. A good number of Chunin and a few of the Anbu that had managed to avoid getting smashed by the ox had their remains splattered across the ground from those egg bombs. Hopping down from one of the few roofs that miraculously still stood, the young Jonin made his way out of the area of imminent destruction via giant bird summons. After making it quickly to the ground, he began to hightail it out of the general area with chakra-enhanced speed. It was while he was running that he ended up hitting a new problem. Though it may be more accurate to say the new problem hit him. He had been running down one of the main roads when it happened. The building to his immediate left exploded in a blast of fragments and cement shards. Atsui was not only knocked off his feet, but several large shards managed to embed themselves in his arms, legs and torso. Thankfully, he had managed to cover his face with his arms, otherwise his head would have been impaled instead. Not that this meant much when he landed on the ground several dozen from where he had been originally standing. Atsui moaned in pain as he tried to regain his bearings, an impossible task to be sure. His entire body felt like it was on fire. He was tired, he hurt, and there were at least a dozen shards of cement ranging from the size of a pebble to the size of daggers sticking into various areas of his body. If he didn't get medical attention soon, he would probably bleed out. A loud snort caught Atsui's attention. Managing to just barely lift his head and show off slightly glazed eyes, the Jonin of Kumogakure caught a glimpse of the thing that had been responsible for almost killing him. It was the rhino, and it was glaring straight at him. I feel almost like Samui for saying this, but not cool. As the rhino glared down at him, its mouth opened up to reveal a person standing inside of it. Atsui's vision was blurry, so he could not make out who they were or even what they looked like. All he could see was black on red. Now why did that sound so familiar? You are the one who took out my centipede. Atsui blinked. The voice was distinctly male. He supposed that was good to know, though just why it was good to know he was about to be killed by a man eluded him. Come to think of it, there were a lot of things eluding him at the moment. Like why he was no longer feeling any pain when just moments ago it felt like his skin had been getting ripped off his muscles and bones. A part of him knew this was not a good thing. Another part was just relieved he didn't hurt anymore. You shall know pain. Well, that didn't sound good. It sounded even worse than the stamping the rhino was making as it dug its hoofed foot into the ground in preparation to charge at him. Atsui tried to move his body as the rhino charged him, but no matter what he did, his body just would not respond to his commands. In fact, he couldn't even feel his body any longer. All he felt was warmth. Man, he was feeling hot. Daburu Kurapansa, Double Black Panther. The last thing Atsui saw was black lightning taking on a blurry form as it charged straight for the rhino. As the shadow clone that had helped him dispelled, Darui watched as the double black panthers blitzed the giant rhino. The two animals made of black lightning, the signature technique that had been taught to him by none other than the third Raikage himself, crashed into the rhino with a fury that could not be contained. Thousands of black tendrils of lightning chakras skittered across its surface in a never-ending and impossible-to-discern pattern that did not follow logic or explanation. It was interesting to see the effects that black lightning had on living creatures. Most lightning techniques were piercing in nature, and while black lightning had the ability to pierce most armors and materials, that was not why it was so deadly. Darui looked on in grim satisfaction as the rhino roared in agony, its body stumbling and spasming as the black lightning boiled the creature's insides. Eventually, the giant rhino came down with a loud crash, upheaving earth and sending chunks of debris flying. The giant beast twitched once, twice, then disappeared in a large puff of smoke as it was sent back to wherever it came from. With a sigh, Darui took a look behind him. Atsui was still laid out amongst the rubble, his body twisted at an unnatural angle. His right arm was bent in a way that should not be humanly possible, unless the joint keeping said arm from moving in that direction had been broken like Atsui's probably was. One of his legs had been crushed underneath what had to be at least several hundred pounds worth of debris. It would take someone of the Raikage's caliber to lift that. Perhaps the most telling sign that Atsui was no longer amongst the living, aside from the lack of a rising and falling chest to signify breathing, was the glassy, glazed over and dull eyes and the large pole that impaled the man's chest. Barely withholding a grimace, Darui tried to think of what he should do now. He needed to take care of the other two summons before they could cause any more damage, then find the summoner and take them out as well. After that he would need to find Raikage-sama again and help him deal with the leader of this group. And that was not even going into what else he was going to have to do after all this was over. It looked like he had a tall order ahead of him. Kachiyose no Jutsu. Darui looked over to his left to see another large cloud of smoke arise from where the rhino had dispelled, his body tensing. He had not realized that the summoner was anywhere near him. Then again, it would be hard for someone who was not a censor to find the person in charge of summoning all these creatures when he or she could be anywhere. The cloud was soon blown away. Darui was given a clear sight of what had been summoned. It was a giant chameleon with leathery, dark green skin. It had one large, protuberant Rinnegan eye that looked like it was barely being held in by the eye socket, and a strange bandaged cylinder for its other eye. Even more unusual than that and the many piercings on its body were the two wings sticking out of its back and the snake-like tail, which actually had a snake head with two Rinnegan eyes. Where is this guy getting all these summons from? Darui could not help but wonder about that. Seriously, giant three-headed dogs that can become four-headed dogs? Centipedes? Rhinos? Ox? And now a chameleon? How many summoning contracts did this guy have? This is so drab. Darui did not bother to turn as a figure dropped down next to him. The young man stood up to his full height, revealing short blonde hair and dark eyes. He was wearing a sleeveless black shirt with a one-strap over one shoulder flak jacket that was the standard issue for all ninja of Chunin and above level in Kumo. Other noted articles of clothing was the Kumogakure headband on his head, his elbow-length arm guards, and red and white Kumo shin guards that went over his shinobi sandals. "There you are, Darui," the man said. "I've been looking everywhere for you." "Apologies, see," Darui did not look very sorry. "I was actually looking for you as well, but then I ran into this guy and, well." "I see," he said, his attention never really straying from the sight in front of him as he spoke with his partner. "I suppose I can forgive for not finding me. You were just doing your duty as a Kumogakure shinobi after all." "Thanks, I guess." Darui began running through several hand seals as he prepared to use another jutsu. In response, the large chameleon and the summoner on top disappeared. "We'd better finish this fight up and find Raikage-sama. Who knows what kind of drab enemies he's fighting." "Right." Raikage robes swished behind him as he ran through the ruined streets of Kumogakure, his teeth grit and his brows furrowed in a mask of barely contained anger. And why shouldn't he be angry? Everywhere he looked he saw nothing but death and destruction. Buildings reduced to rubble, bodies laying where they were killed, the ground and few remaining walls soaked with the blood of his people. But that wasn't even the worst thing. No, the worst thing about all this destruction and chaos was that most of the people who had died were civilians, men, women and children who did not even know how to fight. Whoever had attacked his village had done so with little regard to innocents and non-combatants. It pissed him off to no end. He loved his village. He may not always show it, but the village meant more to him than anything else, even his own life. There was nothing he would not do for his village, whether it was something dirty and underhanded like trying to kidnap the Hyuga heiress during peace negotiations or allying himself completely with Konoha. If it meant keeping his village safe from harm, he would do it without a second thought. That was actually why he had allied himself with Konoha in the first place. When he had heard from his spies that had been keeping an eye on the ongoing war in Kiri and learned that the Yellow Flash had made a return in the man's son, he knew that he would have to do something to keep the man from becoming a threat to his village. At first, he had thought about assassinating him, but later on realized how poorly that would work out. Naruto had mastered his father's jutsu, one that allowed the boy to surpass even himself in speed. He had shown that mastery by decimating a group of nearly 5,000 enemy shinobi. To top it off, the boy had been traveling with Jiraiya. He had a lot of faith in his ninja, but even he knew that taking on 2 cage-level shinobi was suicide for anyone other than 2 other cage-level shinobi. There was a reason cages were known as army killers. His thoughts were later vindicated when he heard of the failed attempt he made at killing the boy. So he had decided to do something else. If he couldn't kill the son of the Yondaime Hokage, he would ally Kumo with him. It was a decision that he did not regret to this day. Of course, none of that mattered now. His village lay in ruins and the one responsible for it was standing right in front of him. He studied the man who appeared before him, standing there so nonchalantly, his face completely devoid of emotions. Like a corpse. The man was of decent height, a bit taller than average. He had spiky orange hair, a lot of piercings and purple eyes with a ripple pattern in them. The Raikage had never seen these eyes before, but he had most certainly heard the legends of the Rinnegan. "You're the Akatsuki scum who attacked my village. And you're the 4th Raikage of Kumogakure," the man replied in a dead voice. "It's an honor to meet you. Tell me, where can I find the Hachibi Jinchuriki? Like hell I'll tell you that." Activating his Raiden no Yoroi, he became wreathed in lightning. Blue currents of incredible power cascaded across his body, enhancing his speed and reflex synapses to levels most shinobi would never reach. With the speed granted to him by the Raiden no Yoroi, he disappeared and quickly reappeared right next to the bastard whose face he was going to smash into a pulp. Iron Kuro, Iron Claw. He could not explain what happened after attempting to use his Iron Claw. 1 millisecond he was set to grab the man's face and the next he was lying against the remains of a destroyed wall. Sitting up, he looked over to see that the man before him had not moved an inch from his spot. What the hell had just happened? Deciding he would need to be more cautious, he stood up and eyed the man warily. It looks like I'll be needing to take you seriously. The man tilted his head, as if not quite understanding what he was saying. Prepare yourself, for I won't be giving you another opportunity to do whatever you just did. He charged up his lightning armor again. He had a feeling he was going to need to go all out from the very beginning if he wanted to have any hope of victory here. Then again, what else should he have expected from a man who bore the Rinnegan? Chapter 26, A Double Surprise. Darui's eyes darted around the destroyed residential district as he searched for a sign, any sign, of their current enemy. That chameleon summon they had been set to fight just disappeared several seconds ago after using some kind of transparency jutsu or something, and now he had no idea where it was. A good shinobi would normally be able to notice small discrepancies within the landscape that marked an invisible enemy. Movements in the dirt, the sound of footsteps, a spike in killing intent from someone who was about to attack. There were all manner in ways for a skilled shinobi to detect another even when they couldn't see their enemy. Not that this meant anything to Darui at the moment, who couldn't detect a thing. No footprints in the dirt, no sound of footsteps, no spike in killing intent. It was almost as if their opponent had disappeared into thin air. Even with all his prodigious talent in the ninja arts, Darui couldn't detect his enemy's presence anywhere. Their enemy was simply better at hiding than he was at tracking. Good thing he wasn't a tracker ninja or he would be embarrassed. See, he spoke to his partner, his hands prepared to either start making seals or grab his sword. There was no telling what an enemy like this was capable of, so he wanted to be ready for anything. Can you sense him? I'm having a bit of difficulty, which was a mild way of saying he couldn't. There's just too much interference from the other summons and enemies running around Kumo. The strange thing is, all of them have the same exact chakra signature as the one we're fighting. That shouldn't be possible. Chakra signatures were unique to each individual. No two people had the same chakra signature. Even identical twins would have different chakra signatures. Are you sure you're sensing them right? Of course I'm sure. An annoyed vein throbbed on C's forehead at Darui questioning his sensing abilities. He was one of the best sensors in Kumo while Darui couldn't sense his way out of a paper bag. His normally relaxed partner really had no right to talk. And I'm telling you that I'm sensing 9 chakra signatures that are all identical to each other. It's interfering with my ability to sense our enemy. Now stop questioning me. Alright, Darui mumbled his apology. No need to be so drab. Darui, behind you. The quick and sudden warning had Darui spinning around to face whatever C was warning him about. He was taken back for a second when he saw nothing, however, and this gave their invisible opponent the opportunity to get a clear shot at him before he even realized what was happening. Darui's eyes widened as something long and fleshy wrapped itself around his leg. He looked down, but couldn't see whatever was gripping him. He did, however, see the creases in his clothing as whatever wrapped around him tightened. His clothes were also getting a tad wet. A tongue? This is not good. Without warning and before he had time to cut the invisible tongue off him, Darui was yanked into the air. Tisking in annoyance as he tried to reach for his sword but kept failing due to how hard he was being shaken, Darui decided it would be easier to simply use one of his jutsu. Fortunately, he had a number of jutsu to choose from that would benefit him in a situation like this. Rabbit, dog, boar, ram, rat, Raiden, Kangekia, lightning release, wave of inspiration. Channeling as much chakra as he dared to his hands, Darui felt the flow of his chakra reverse and polarize as it was changed into lightning-natured chakra. Garlands of crackling electricity arched and skittered across his hands like living creatures, coating and covering both appendages with their blue glow. Acting with speeds that most people would not expect from such a laid-back guy, Darui grabbed onto whatever was attached to his leg. He winced a bit as his own technique sent a shock through his system, but his pain was secondary to his primary objective. The lightning on his hands went down into the thing gripping him, lighting up the appendage, which he could now see was definitely a tongue as it traced a path towards the owner of said fleshy, pink appendage. The summons released a shrill scream as it became visible again due to the lightning chakra currently shocking it, breaking its concentration. It let Darui go, allowing him to fall back to the earth. As he fell, his body spun and righted itself so that he would land on his feet. At the same time, his hands were already going through several hand seals in preparation for launching another technique. Raigon Rake Ocho, Lightning Illusion Flash of Lightning Pillar. While Darui was preparing his own jutsu, C had already gone through the hand seals needed to use one of his opening techniques. The Lightning Illusion Flash of Lightning Pillar was a supplementary genjutsu that had no range, meaning it could be used at close, middle or long distance and still affect the enemy all the same. Like the name stated, it was a lightning release genjutsu that blinded people by making it appear as if a bright light was emanating from the one who cast it. It generated an electric light directly from C's body, which increased to blinding proportions within seconds after it's been cast. With his opponents blinded, C would then be able to cast more illusions on his enemies before they even realized it and finish them off while they were distracted. Or allow his partner to finish them off, as was the case here. Ranton. Raise Asa Kasu, Storm Release. Laser Circus. As Darui held his hands out in front of him, a halo of lightning chakras surrounded and spread out from them. The technique quickly encircled his hands before several beams shot out from the center of the halo where most of the chakra was being concentrated. The beams of light blue, electrified chakra tore through the air, all of them heading straight for the chameleon. In response, the summon's animal turned invisible just as the beams sliced through the spot where it was standing. They continued on to strike the ground not even a half a second later, obliterating a small chunk of the earth and causing smoke, dust and debris to get launched skyward as a miniature explosion occurred, further obscuring the area in a veil that Darui could not pierce. Not that it mattered, really, because his sight was practically useless right now anyways. See? He called out, not taking his eyes off the cloud of dust as he looked for any sign of movement. While he wouldn't be able to see the chameleon summons, he would see the dust that got displaced in the air when a creature that big moved. Provided it hadn't been sliced apart by the piercing power of his storm release technique. It's to your left. Damn, Darui had been sure that he had gotten it with that last attack. They'd had the creature dead to rights and hit it with one of their better combos. How had that thing managed to move fast enough to avoid his attack and not disturb all that dust in the air? He would have to think on it later. Right now, there were more important things to worry about, and any hesitation on their part could easily end with their lives. Not wanting to present an easy target, Darui began moving as quickly as he could, dodging debris and bodies alike as he began running in a zigzag pattern. It was a good thing he reacted to C's words so quickly. Not even a second after he had darted away did something invisible strike the ground hard enough to crater it. Had that hit him, it might have very well left him as a bloody smear on the ground. Beginning more hand seals, Darui prepared to use another jutsu while C looked like he was already in the process of casting one of his genjutsus. Hopefully, his partner's illusion would distract that thing for a little longer than it did last time. Raiden. Unzeji Nidazumu, Lightning Release. Jaded Edge 2x Prism, black lightning erupted from Darui's body, covering him in skittering garlands of dark electricity, which soon shot off his body and into the air. Higher and higher it soared until it was completely out of sight, seemingly piercing the heavens. Not even a second later, the black lightning descended towards where C had last said the summon animal's location was, splitting off into 4 bolts that struck the ground in 4 different locations that when looked at from a bird's eye view would have been marked as the points of a prism. Not even a second later, the 4 points of black lightning shot inwards, striking at the center in between the 4 points. The explosion created from the attack was most impressive. A large, black ball of condensed lightning and chakra over 6 meters in circumference. It looked like all the power behind the attack was being contained within that sphere. Only a few small arcs of lightning managed to escape it, lashing outside of the sphere and striking the gravel, rocks and buildings with enough power to blast whatever it hit apart. When the attack died down, there was a large crater sitting in the ground. You didn't get him, Darui. C called out, alerting the dark-skinned and normally laid-back man to the fact that their enemy was not dead. He's moving again. To your left. TCH. This guy is really drab, Darui swore as he made to move. Before he could, something clamped down on his right shoulder. Whatever it was strong enough to easily pierce his clothing and flesh. Blood began pouring down from the wound, which looked to be multiple puncture marks of varying size. Biting back a scream of pain, Darui was lifted off his feet and tossed into a wall, which crumbled upon being forced to receive his weight and kicking up a lot of dust and smoke. A second later, something managed to wrap around C's torso and arms, bringing them together and forcing them to constrict. The Jonin-level shinobi tried to break what could only be this summon's tongue, but it was surprisingly durable, and no matter how much muscle he put into his effort or how much chakra he pumped into his body, nothing seemed capable of breaking the insanely strong appendage that had managed to get a hold of him. The situation was made even worse because his arms were being held against his torso, meaning he couldn't use his hands, and without the ability to make hand seals, he couldn't use any of his jutsu. Even the simple kawarimi was out of his reach with his arms restricted like they were. Before his situation could become any more tenuous, Darui appeared before him in a blur, his right hand already gripping the sheath of his sword, which he yanked out quickly. Flowing from the action of unsheathing his blade, Darui continued swinging it downwards towards where he accurately guessed the invisible tongue was. His blade, charged with lightning chakra and glowing a light blue as electricity danced across its surface, sliced into something, presumably the tongue, with impunity. There was an outraged shriek as one half of the tongue, the half that Darui had cut off from the rest of the summon's body, became visible. Darui smirked in satisfaction. It wasn't much, but it looked like they had found at least one weakness. Took you long enough, C grunted as he was finally free from his constraints. Shaking his arms, he tried to get feeling back into his arms. Did you have to wait so long to attack after using kawarimi? Sorry, Darui didn't sound all that sorry. I was waiting for the best opening to do the most damage. This guy's slippery. I haven't been able to get a lock on him, and since you haven't been casting any genjutsu on him, it's harder for me to hit him than usual. I have been casting genjutsu on him, C told his partner in annoyance, surprising Darui. It's just not that none of them seem to affect him. A summoned animal that's immune to genjutsu? Darui sighed. This is so drab. Before C could scold his partner on using that stupid catchphrase of his, a loud shrill screech caught their attention. Craning their necks up, the pair saw a giant bird with a drill beak heading towards them at speeds that almost seemed to break the sound barrier. The pair were soon forced to jump out of the way as the monstrous bird summon dropped several dozen eggs from its rear end that soon exploded against the ground. The large explosions from multiple detonation points not only sent up large amounts of earth and debris, but also caused hot winds to shoot upwards towards the pair of Kumogakure Junin. Both were jostled by the winds that lashed against them and pushed them further away from each other, separating them. As the two began to finally descend several dozen meters from where they had been originally, C found himself getting smacked in the back by something invisible. Goo! Having already been falling, the Jonin of Kumo was sent towards the ground at an increased rate that made him look like a streak of white in the air. He soon ended up hitting a building face first, smashing into and through the ceiling to what had, at one point, been a small house. He ended up lying face down on the ground, in a small crater just a little larger than his body, groaning in pain. While he had been hit with attacks that were a lot more painful, he would admit those were few and far between. His back was burning from where that thing had hit him. It felt like someone had taken sledgehammer to his spine. To top it off, he had practically belly flopped through that roof and the concrete of the floor. He likely had bruises on his bruises. He tried to push himself up, but all he managed to do was turn himself over so that he was lying on his back. When that happened, his eyes widened as they met a pair of Rinnegan eyes set within a man with long, orange hair. C was pulled to his feet by the man before being forced onto his knees. A hand was placed upon his head and the Kumo Jonin found himself incapable of moving. No matter how hard he struggled, or how much his mind told him to attack this man, he wasn't capable of doing anything other than kneeling there. It was like his body had completely frozen up. "Where is the Jinchuriki for the Hachibi?" asked the man as C's mind screamed at him to move. He didn't say anything that would betray the location of the Raikage's adoptive brother. He was one of the Fourth's most loyal shinobi, and he would never betray his leader. Too bad for him the human path did not need to hear him speak. I see, so the Hachibi Jinchuriki is currently residing at a place called Unraikyo. C's eyes widened in both shock and fear. He was an intelligent ninja, preferring to analyze his opponents and come up with a plan before engaging. A shinobi like him was easily able to read between the lines and realize that this man had just read his mind. But how was the question? Was this an ability granted to him by the Rinnegan? The legendary Dujutsu was certainly one of mystery. What very little text existed on the Rinnegan only spoke of its ability to control all 5 main elements and that it was a power originally used by the legendary Rikudo Sennin. Everything else from its abilities to its origins were wrapped in a veil of mystery. These questions and more fled from C's mind, as did everything else seconds later when the man pulled his hand away, taking the Kumo Junin's soul with it. He blitzed towards the spiky-haired Rinnegan wielder, his body moving so fast it did not even leave a blur. One moment he was standing several meters away, the next he was right in front of Pain, his lead arm extended and covered in the electricity from his lightning armor as he prepared to strike the man who had dared attack his village with a lariat. Just before E's attack could touch Pain, the Raikage once again found himself being sent sailing backwards, only this time the attack was even more powerful than before. The last time the attack had hit him, it had felt as if a strong force was pushing him back. This time it felt like his entire body had just taken one of Senju Tsunade's legendary punches without having his lightning armor protecting him, only instead of a concentrated area like his stomach or face, it felt like he had been hit by the fist of a giant. Rather than ending up buried under a pile of rubble, staring at a ceiling of a home he had been busted through, the attack was powerful enough that he was blasted through several buildings, tumbling end over end like a rag doll before managing to right himself. His feet soon skidded along the ground as he was forced to channel chakra into them in order to stop his backwards momentum. Even then, he ended up skidding back for several more feet, leaving 2 long trenches where his feet had been dragged through the ground to signify his passing through. Standing to his full height, he frowned as he tried to figure out what had just happened. The man before him hadn't even moved an inch, he had him dead to rights, and yet, somehow it was him who had been blasted away like he was a 50-pound weakling. Unfortunately, he had never been a very deep thinker, especially when in battle. He was the kind of guy who relied more on his instincts than anything else when in combat. Which was sad because right now he couldn't make heads or tails of what just happened to him. All he knew was that this guy apparently had some kind of special jutsu that he used to shove him away with the kind of strength expected from Senju Tsunade, and he didn't even lift a finger to do it. For those who knew the Raikage, they knew that he was hot-headed and easily angered, especially when something happened that he didn't understand. Right now, he was just not getting how this guy had been able to launch such a devastating attack on him without even making so much as a twitch. It was even worse than when he faced Minato and the bastard managed to dodge his fastest attacks. Naturally, he decided to charge at the man again so he could wipe that blank look off the idiot's face. Of course, he wasn't stupid enough to charge right in from the front. No, while the 4th Raikage was quick to anger and even quicker to action, he was still an intelligent man with a keen sense for battle and tactics. This time he came in from behind the man. He decided to go with something simple. An Iron Kuro. Meanwhile, while his hand was clawed and ready to grip the back of his enemy's head, he was going to observe his opponent and see if he could not determine some kind of weakness to whatever technique was being used against him. Once again it happened. Just as he was about to hit Pain with his devastating attack, the man seemed to have sensed his approach and quickly reacted by ducking under his Iron Kuro, spinning around to face him. This time, Pain held out both hands towards him, and again, he felt himself getting propelled backwards at incredible speeds. This time, he was prepared for it, however, and when he felt himself getting launched backwards, he began to crank up the juice and added more power to his lightning armor. Soon, the two powers began a fight for dominance that neither seemed capable of winning. The Raikage, with speed maxed out beyond what most humans should be capable of accomplishing, was unwilling to give an inch even though keeping his body running at such a high level was beginning to put a strain on his muscles and bone structure. On the other hand, Pain seemed completely emotionless as he continued pumping more and more chakra into his attack. It was a battle of attrition, with neither side willing to give the other an inch yet both wanting the other to lose. In a battle such as this, the one with the strongest will, or just the one who was more stubborn, would be the victor. E was one of the most stubborn bastards anyone would ever see. With a final roar of defiance, the fourth Raikage managed to break the stalemate. It seemed that Pain could not hold whatever technique he had been using for very long before it just stopped working. On the other hand, he could use his lightning armor for as long as he wanted, though the longer he used it the bigger the strain was on his body. Still, it was a small price to pay for finally getting a good hit on the bastard who had destroyed most of his village. Because there was no more resistance in the form of whatever power Pain had used to try and push him away, E's body followed the laws of physics. The speed at which he had been running had already been quite outstanding, and the only reason he had not moved was due to Pain exerting an equal amount of force to keep him in place. Without that, the fourth Raikage not only shot forward and closed the distance incredibly quick, he did so in less time than it took to blink an eye. This time, there would be no way for the Rinnegan-wielding bastard to dodge his attack. He found his body halted when something sharp and painful stabbed him in the stomach. His body folded over the offending object as it ground against his lightning armor, which protected him from most of the damage whatever had stabbed him would have done, though it did nothing to prevent the blunt force trauma of having something rammed into his gut. Grabbing the offending object as he folded around it, the Raikage let out a titanic roar of anger and pulled whatever was on the other end to him. He soon discovered that the thing trying to pierce his stomach was a long, prehensile-like, serrated tail, and that the person on the other end was a really unusual-looking bastard with 6 arms and 3 faces. Not that this person's looks mattered to E, the guy was dead either way. The strange 3-faced man soon came into contact with E's lightning-infused fist as it smashed against his chest. The fourth Raikage did not have the incredible chakra-enhanced strength of Senju Tsunade, but with his lightning armor, that really didn't matter. Under the incredible power and strength granted to him through this technique, this strange new enemy may as well have been made of paper. Even though it was only a single attack, Asura found itself being completely destroyed by the lightning-coated fist to his chest. His body literally exploded into thousands of shards and gizmos, revealing that he was actually some kind of robotic doll similar to, but nothing at all like the puppets of Sunagakure. As pieces of his body scattered and bounced along the ground, his head hit the dirt several meters away and rolled to a stop next to Pain, who had finally moved away from his original position. That was a very deadly attack, Pain admitted as he stared down at his Asura path with emotionless eyes. He looked back up at the Raikage to see him huffing and puffing in anger. I dare say that would have killed me had it hit. It was supposed to kill you, you bastard. E growled in annoyance and anger. He had been so close to finally showing this guy why he shouldn't have attacked his village when that jackass had shown up out of nowhere. And just who the hell was that guy anyways? Some kind of robotic puppet? These Akatsuki freaks were the weirdest bunch he had ever seen. I am not one to be done in as easily as that, Pain stated, though I do applaud you for your effort. Before he could make any kind of retort, or just attack the man, which he had planned on doing, another person appeared before him. This one was a man with a pudgy face, the same orange hair as the other two and the same Rinnegan eyes. What the hell? E's eyes widened. What the hell was going on here? The Rinnegan was supposed to be a legendary dujutsu that was so rare only the Rikudo Sennin was said to have possession of it. Now he had met not 1, not 2, but 3 people who all had the Rinnegan. What the fuck was going? In his surprise, he could not react in time when the Preta path grabbed onto him and began to drain him of his chakra. The crackling electricity that surrounded his body soon dispersed as the chakra he put into the technique was absorbed by this new enemy. Thankfully, the act of having his chakra drained was enough that he finally managed to gather his wits and used the immense strength granted to him through years of lifting weights in his office to break Preta's hold on him. This was followed by a powerful headbutt that had the Rinnegan bearer stumbling backwards. Rather than do what most shinobi would do in this situation, which was jump backwards to put some distance between them and bombard the enemy with long-range ninjutsu, he did the exact opposite and grabbed this new guy by the face after making his hand into the shape of a claw. Ien Kuro, lifting Preta up by his face, the Raikage barely gave the path a second to realize its situation before smashing him down head first into the gravel. The results were very pleasing. Preta's head was literally crushed underneath the clawed hand. Even without his lightning armor active, He was still someone with immense physical strength as suggested by his powerful frame. Bansho Tenen, heavenly attraction of all creation. Before he could even think of attacking Pain again or congratulating himself on his kill, he was quite suddenly jerked off his feet and sent flying towards the diva path. His eyes widened as he moved closer and closer to the man who had his hand outstretched towards him as if beckoning him over. The move had been so unexpected that there was very little he could do to counter against it. Due to the force being exerted on him, he could not bring his hands up to use even the most basic of jutsu, and because his feet were nowhere near the ground, he was not even capable of channeling chakra to the bottom of them, so he would stick to the ground. He was, for lack of a better term, a sitting duck. At least, that's what Pain thought. With determination flowing through his veins, he did not try and fight the pull on his body, which would have been an exercise in futility anyways. Instead, he watched as the man using the strange technique that seemed capable of attracting and repelling objects pulled him closer and closer. It was a good thing he was used to moving at such high speeds. Because his eyes were well adjusted to spotting fast-moving objects, the fourth Raikage was able to see Pain pull out some kind of black metal rod and pull his arm back in preparation to stab him. Not that he would ever allow such an obvious attack to do him in. He was not only a kage, but one that specialized in close-range combat. Taijutsu was his forte, and only someone like Senju Tsunade, Namikaze Minato and now Namikaze Naruto had ever been able to match him in that arena. This Pain character seemed to be primarily a ninjutsu user. Granted, he had only displayed 2 abilities so far, but it would not surprise E if the man only had a few more centered around his ability to attract and repel objects. What's more, he had managed to catch Pain off guard with his taijutsu. It had only been thanks to the timely intervention of those other 2 that this Rinnegan wielder had been saved. When Pain thrust the metal rod forward to stab E through the stomach, the Raikage was prepared. Activating his lightning armor not even a second after the attack was made in order to increase his physical prowess and speed to incredible levels, E's left hand lashed out, grabbed hold of the black metal rod, snapped it in half, then launched a powerful right hook at Pain's face. This time, there was no path around to save Pain from getting hit this time. Like the sound of thunder cracking against the ground, the noise from E's lightning-enhanced fist striking Pain's face was loud enough that it caused the earth to rumble. The punch did more than just make a lot of noise, however, it also shattered Pain's jaw and sent him flying backwards in the same manner he had been doing to E for the past few minutes. Like a lightning jutsu gone out of control, his body spinning like a top, Pain struck the ground, digging up massive amounts of rock and dirt as he created a large trench along the path he was thrown. He struck one of the buildings in his way, going straight through it and coming out the other side. The building collapsed in on itself like a house of cards, and still Pain traveled further. The Raikage glared at where he had last seen his enemy. He was sure that would put an end to him. He had struck out with everything he had in that last attack. Not even someone of Tsunade's strength would have been able to survive a hit like that without being liquidized. Nodding to himself, the Raikage prepared to find the rest of the enemies attacking the village and protect his people before his entire body froze. His eyes widened as he felt his chakra being leached from him. Looking down, he found Preta gripping his calves tightly. His lightning armor went out as he no longer had the chakra to sustain it. He was still alive. He had been sure he'd killed the bastard. He could even see its face was still caved in where he had crushed it beneath his hand. With a growl, the Raikage made to yank one of his legs out of the idiot's grip and stomp on his head when an indescribable pain pierced his abdomen. He blinked several times as he stared down at the bloody tip of a serrated tail. Still in shock, he craned his neck to look behind him and saw the mechanical enemy he had annihilated a little while ago standing behind him, a grin on all 3 faces. "What the fuck?" He grunted as he went down to a knee. He tried to stand again, but the chakra being drained from him by the Preta path was leaving him incredibly weakened. All he could do was shake and heave as he tried to push his body beyond what it was capable of. What an amazingly strong attack. He looked up, disbelieving as he saw Pain walking back towards him looking no worse for wear. There didn't seem to be any damage done to him at all. "You truly live up to your title, Raikage. An attack of that caliber would have killed most people. He coughed as blood began welling up in his lungs. "How are you still alive?" "A pointless question," Pain said in his usual monotone voice. There is no need to answer it when you are going to be dead soon. Growled as he tried to stand again, but was too weakened. His vision was beginning to blur from a lack of chakra and blood loss. You fought valiantly, but in the end it wasn't enough. You now know pain, but it is too late. I cannot let one as dangerous as you live. A flash of black was all that the Raikage saw before a rod of black metal was stabbed all the way through his neck and out the back. He gurgled as he bled out, his eyes glazing over and his body slumping. A single second passed, then two. Finally, the Raikage stopped breathing. Pain looked at the body of the Raikage, then raised his head to look at the rest of the village. There was no more need to stay here now that he had the location of the Hachibi Jinchuriki. All that was left to do was use this village as an example of what would happen to those who defied God. Using his powers to lift himself into the air, Pain floated high above the hidden village. From his bird's eye view he could see how much damage he had caused. More than half the village was nearly destroyed. Not that it mattered. This village wouldn't be around at all for much longer. Raising his hands high above his head, Pain's gaze sharpened as his chakra surged in preparation for his technique. In less than a second, Kumogakure would be no more. Shinra Tensai. Within the darkened bedroom that was lit only by the few streams of light that managed to sneak in through the curtains of a nearby window, Namikaze Naruto felt himself begin to stir. It was a slow stirring, the kind where one still felt a bit groggy from the events of yesterday and needed a few minutes to adjust from that moment of restful peace to complete awareness. Blinking several times as his eyes adjusted to the darkened room, the young man took absent note of the decor. He easily recognized the master bedroom of the Namikaze estate. He also easily recognized the female body snuggled deeply into his side. Smiling slightly, Naruto reached out with a hand and began to gently run his hands through Konan's beautiful blue hair. Rather than fan out like the other girl's hair did, Konan's was too short for that and thus was arrayed in a typical bedhead fashion, with numerous strands sticking up chaotically sort of like his own. An amusing thought escaped him as he wondered if their children would look like that, their mother's hair color but his style. He shook the thought off. While an appealing thought, children weren't something they could afford right now. Not with Akatsuki, and more importantly, that guy claiming to be Uchiha Madara still on the loose. The last thing he wanted was for his wife and child to be used as a hostage. Wanting to get his mind off the dark place his thoughts were taking him, the last Namikaze heir found himself gazing appreciate at Konan's beautiful figure. The blanket he had used to cover them had fallen a bit and was only covering up to their waist now, so Naruto had a decent view of some of the woman's bountiful chest, blocked only partially by the way her right boob was mashed against his torso, but also by her angelic face as it rested against his shoulder. Though he could not see, Naruto could definitely feel the way their legs had entwined sometime during the night. It was something he always enjoyed, waking up to the feeling of a pair of soft, smooth and downright sexy legs hooked around his own after a night of passionate lovemaking. Then again, he loved everything about moments like this, from the way Konan's breath felt hot against his skin to the way her body was pressed so closely against his there wasn't even enough space for one of her paper jutsu to slip through. Call him sappy, but one of the best parts of having sex was waking up next to the woman you loved. Or would that be women in his case? Well, whatever. He could think on that later. As Naruto spent his time just enjoying the feeling of waking up with one of the people who meant the world to him, Konan began stirring. Noticing a change in his angel's breathing, he looked down just in time to see Konan raise her head and blink her beautiful amber eyes several times. After a second or two of looking like they were still asleep, those half-lidded eyes sharpened and focused on him. Morning, Naruto greeted warmly. Konan gave him a smile that matched the warmth in his voice. Good morning, Naruto, Konan mumbled as she leaned up enough to give him a chaste kiss on the lips. How are you feeling? He asked as Konan laid her head back down on his shoulder. A little sore, Konan admitted, not quite managing to suppress a shiver as her lover let his fingers trail along her back, leaving goosebumps in their way. She pressed her lips against the skin of his shoulder in return, and smiled when she felt his breath hitch slightly. But a good kind of sore. I'm glad. Silence reigned for a few seconds as Naruto continued to stroke the woman's bare back. They would need to take a shower eventually. He could feel the dried sweat sticking to her frame, and he doubted he was much better. Last night, Naruto looked back down to see Konan staring up at him, her chin resting against his shoulder. Last night was incredible. I'm glad we shared this moment together. Her eyes became soft as a small smile crossed her lips. For some reason, I feel much closer to you than before. Almost makes you wish we had done this earlier, huh? Asked Naruto, which earned him a light smack to the chest. Joking, just joking. He saw the look he was getting and grinned sheepishly. Well, sort of. Anyways, we should probably take a shower and then head down for some breakfast. On cue, Naruto's stomach rumbled like some kind of ravenous beast. Did I mention I was starving? Konan giggled at Naruto's antics, then stopped as she realized she was giggling. She looked back at Naruto, her eyes narrowing as she saw the grin on his face. You didn't hear anything. Naruto's grin widened. Sure I didn't. You didn't hear anything. How about this? With movements that were swift and sure, Naruto rolled the two of them over so that Konan was pinned to the bed while he was hovering over her. I'll pretend nothing happened if you give me a kiss. Konan smiled as her arms wrapped around his neck and pulled his face down to hers. I think I can do that, she whispered, before pulling him into a passionate kiss. After several minutes of not quite going all the way but certainly doing more than just kissing and fondling, Naruto and Konan mutually decided to adjourn to the restroom to get clean. Having never been this intimate with Naruto until then, Konan realized that there were things about the blonde that she had not known. For one thing, Naruto was a very attentive lover. She had known that he was capable of supporting her emotionally, as well as how able he was at supporting her physically, but she had not known about his skills at supporting her intimately. Her time last night had made her realize that Naruto was a very skilled lover, but it was their time in the restroom that made Konan truly aware of how attentive he was to her needs as a woman. She had sat between Naruto's legs while they showered, shivering and moaning in delight as he gently and lovingly washed and kneaded her back, working out any and all knots she had while at the same time getting her clean. He had spent the same amount of attention to her breasts, stomach, legs and feet, messaging and worshipping her body as he cleaned her up. By the time every part of her had been washed, Konan was more than ready to get dirty again. It was a shame she had been too sore to commit in any acts of debauchery. Getting out of the shower, the pair decided they wanted to relax for a little while longer. Naruto made a shadow clone and had it transform into a dry, clothed version of himself. After ordering it to make breakfast, which the clone left to do while grumbling under its breath about lucky bastard originals, Naruto and Konan found themselves lounging in the large bathtub, relaxing as steam rose from the water's surface. In what had become practically par for the course as far as Naruto's love life was concerned, Naruto was sitting at the end of the tub with his back against the tub itself. Meanwhile, Konan sat in between his legs, her firm, shapely rear pressing against the obvious sign of his arousal. Her back was resting against his chest, her head laying back so that she could press her cheek against Naruto's as his arms wrapped tightly around her, making her feel like she had been encased in a loving cocoon. We haven't talked much about yours and Ero Sennin's battle against pain, Naruto said after several moments of comfortable silence. How are you feeling? Konan sighed as she turned on her side and lowered her body so that she could rest her head on his chest. If they were going to have this conversation, she wanted to be comfortable, and listening to Naruto's heartbeat was surprisingly comforting. I don't know, she said at last. I'm not sure how I feel. For the longest time, Nagato had been my best friend, my world. I was his biggest supporter and his goals in life were what held me up. Now that he has fallen to darkness, I feel almost like I no longer have a purpose. Naruto did not say anything as Konan spoke. Rather, he listened and let her express herself through words. And even though you and I got together, and I knew that you were at odds with him, I had always hoped. A few cold droplets of water splashed against Naruto's chest. They presented a stark contrast to the heat coming from the bath water. I always thought that I would be able to save him. That if I stuck close to him, I could subtly influence his decisions down a less destructive route. Then maybe the three of us could have worked together to bring peace, but now. I understand, Naruto said, running his hand through Konan's hair. It's hard watching someone who meant so much to you fall and realize there is very little you can do to stop it. Naruto's own mind went to Sasuke, the person he had thought of as family that went on to join Orochimaru. He knew exactly how Konan was feeling, having already experienced such an event himself. I wish I could say something that would help you cope with this, but the truth is, I never really got over Sasuke's betrayal. Even now, a part of me hopes that he can be redeemed, while another still feels the sting of what he did to Sakura, and I truly don't know what I can say that would make you feel better. Just be here for me, Konan murmured as lifted her head to look up at him. That's all I need. I'll always be here for you, Naruto responded earnestly, causing Konan to smile as she leaned up and claimed his lips in a kiss. Naruto's hands tightened around her waist, pulling Konan flush against him as her own arms entwined around his neck and made to pull her up so she could have more access to his mouth. A moan escaped her lips as one of Naruto's hands moved from the small of her back to her perfectly peach-shaped butt and began to grope it. Konan responded by moving her ass in time to his squeezes and caresses, grinding it against her lover's, increasing proof of her lover's arousal. Their tongues soon broke through each other's mouths and began moving together. They pushed and rubbed and hooked against each other as they played that age-old game in which everybody was a winner and no one was a loser. Konan thought it was one of the most enjoyable games in the world. Eventually, Konan's grinding led to the pair's mutual release. A low groan came from Naruto's mouth as Konan let out a breathy sigh of content and sank deeper into the water. Her head came rest against his chest once more, and she spent a number of minutes just laying kisses on his pectorals as her blonde lover began running a hand across her back while she came down from the post-orgasmic high. We should probably get out, Naruto said after several minutes of silence. My clones finished making breakfast, and I really should formally introduce you to Yugao. Plus, if we stay in here any longer we'll start to prune. That's the one in the Anbu, right? Konan asked, her eyes drooping a little as they both stood up. She was feeling a bit tired, not just from staying in the water so long, but also from what they had just done. All she really wanted to do right now was drag Naruto back to bed and snuggle against him while she slept. Yes, Naruto nodded. You never met her before since we didn't get involved with each other until after the Chunin exams. He paused. She's currently eating breakfast, so now would be the best time. After drying off and getting dressed in a pair of civvies, Konan and Naruto made their way out of the room and into the kitchen. There they found Yugao sitting at the long table, eating what looked to be an omelette with a side bowl of fruit. As soon as the pair entered, said purple-haired beauty looked up and gave a slight mischievous, if strained, smile. The next time you two get up to the kinds of antics you did last night, you may want to think about applying a silencing seal on the door and the walls, and maybe the ceiling, floor and window for good measure. Why, you heard that? Naruto asked in surprise while Konan blushed at hearing that her debauchery had been heard by someone. Yugao nodded. I heard it all the way from the basement. She looked at the pair, her eyes showing a mixture of amusement and jealousy. You must have been pretty amazing to make her scream that loudly. Konan's cheeks flushed an even deeper shade of red, creating a very stark contrast against her blue hair. Naruto shook his head and smiled as he grabbed Konan by the hand and led her over to table. After moving her being gentlemanly and helping her into a chair, the blonde walked around the table towards Yugao, absently creating another shadow clone to grab 2 more plates and put the food on the table. I think you're just jealous, Naruto smiled slightly as Yugao twitched. Leaning down, he wrapped his arms around her and leaned in so he could place a kiss on her cheeks. But you know you shouldn't be. Whenever you're ready, I'll be here waiting. Yugao's countenance relaxed. Her eyes softened and she smiled at him before turning her head and placing a chaste kiss on his lips. Thank you, she said with a grateful smile. You never need to thank me for something like this, Naruto told her as the clone set both his and Konan's food on the table and dispelled. Sitting down in front of his own plate, Naruto decided to finally get the official introduction out of the way. Yugao, this is Konan. She was a spy for me within Akatsuki and the reason Gar is still alive. Konan, this is Azuki Yugao, one of the youngest Anbu in history and a well-known sword junkie. I hope you know, Yugao began with grace and poise, only the slight twitching of her eyebrow letting on to what she thought of being called a sword junkie. That I am going to get you for that comment later on. And I'm looking forward to it, Naruto grinned, causing Yugao to sigh and turn her attention onto Konan. So, welcome to the family, I guess, she said. It's nice to officially meet you. Likewise, Konan felt a little weird knowing that this woman was also one of Naruto's lovers. Being from a megacure, she only knew of the laws Konoha had towards clans, specifically clans that were nearing extinction, through Naruto. It still felt strange to share the person she planned on marrying with several other women. Naruto has told me a lot about you. Oh, has he? Yugao sent a sidelong glance at Naruto, who was whistling an innocent tune as he periodically placed food in his mouth. When he got the woman's attention, he immediately turned and looked away, causing her to narrow her eyes and look back at Konan. And just what has he been saying about me? I don't really think it's necessary for you to know what we've been talking about, do you? Asked an embarrassed Naruto. Oh no, Yugao gave Naruto a small grin. It is very necessary. She turned back to Konan, ignoring the way Naruto began to sputter. So, care to share? Konan looked over at Naruto for a brief moment, watching as he waved his hands across his face in a no gesture, then turned back to Yugao. He used to speak very often about how you were constantly protecting him when he was younger, and how he always used to think you were the most beautiful woman in the world, she told Yugao succinctly, though with a hint of amusement and envy in her eyes. Both Naruto and Yugao blushed. Ichi really said that? Asked Yugao, her eyes moving over to Naruto before the color staining her cheeks deepened and she looked away. Konan nodded. He did. He also mentioned about how when he was younger he wanted to marry you, and would constantly fight your boyfriend every time he came over. It was a testament to her recovery that the indirect mentioning of Hayate didn't even so much as cause her to flinch, though her chest did feel a tight ache when she thought of him. This time when she looked over to see a red-faced Naruto pouting at the two of them, her eyes softened and a smile crossed her lips as she remembered those very simple times. Yeah, she chuckled warmly, he was always going on about how he would beat up Hayate-kun and then make me fall in love with him. Of course, then he went to the academy and fell in love with that Sakura girl. Yugao crossed her arms and gave a mock pout. I felt like I had been replaced. No one could replace you, Naruto said lowly, his face turning red when the other two looked at him. I thought I should aim lower. You know, 'cause it was clear that Hayate had an advantage over me. So you gave up, Yugao teased. What happened to never giving up and never going back on your word? I didn't give up, Naruto puffed up in mock indignation. I was simply making a temporary retreat until a better opportunity to sweep you off your feet arose. And I thought that since Sakura was cute and had a unique hair color, she would be good practice for when you finally realized I was the man of your dreams. You mean the boy of my dreams, with a teasing smile. Yugao watched as Naruto gave her a pout. And it doesn't look like you ended up getting much practice. You never even managed to get a single date with Sakura. Don't remind me, Naruto moaned. As Konan watched the small byplay between the two, she couldn't help but smile. You two seem to get along very well, she noted, looking over at Yugao with a smile. I'm actually kind of jealous. Yeah, well, Yugao trailed off unsurely. It's just because I've known him for so long. Perhaps. Light banter continued throughout the rest of breakfast as Konan and Yugao learned a bit more about each other. They seemed to get along fairly well, which Naruto was glad for. The last thing he wanted was for these two to start fighting each other like Mei and Yugito had when they first met. Dealing with that kind of situation once was more than enough for him. Near the end of breakfast, the doorbell to his estate rang out. Frowning, Naruto created a shadow clone their plates and washed them off while he, Konan and Yugao walked over to the door. The person on the other end was an Anbu member with a lizard mask covering his face. When he saw Naruto standing there, he snapped off a salute. Namikaze-san, Hokage-sama has requested you in her office. Did she say why? I am not privy to her reasons, sir, the Anbu replied dutifully. Naruto nodded, figuring that the woman probably just wanted to speak with him. He looked over at Konan and Yugao, both of whom understood his expression. Don't worry about us, Naruto, Yugao said. I'm off duty right now, so I can use this time to show Konan around Konoha while wait for you to get back. Naruto smiled at the pair, before turning back to look at the Anbu. Lead the way, Lizard-san. The Anbu nodded as he grabbed Naruto by the sleeve of his shirt. Together, the two disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Tsunade leaned back against her chair, sipping at a saucer of sake in order to keep from becoming a nervous wreck. These past few days had been very hectic since Naruto came back from the successful mission to capture Sasuke. She had tried working up the courage to tell them about their relationship, but Jiraiya's battle with pain had interfered. Then she had to personally keep Jiraiya from dying on them. Even then, he was still left with just a single arm and had been put into a coma. Now there was nothing left getting in her way. Jiraiya was out of danger. Sasuke had been retrieved. Pain was an ever-looming threat but not one they could deal with right now. Even the paperwork was complete, which was a rarity for her. All of this led to one thing. It was time to tell Naruto of their relationship to each other. She was nervous, frightened even, but he deserved to know. She had sent an Anbu out 15 minutes ago, so all that was left to do now was wait for Naruto to arrive. Which was why she was sitting there, contenting herself with sake so that the passing of time did not increase her nerves. If she got any more nervous, she wasn't sure she could go through with it. A brief wind kicked up, followed by a swirl of leaves. A few seconds later, Naruto appeared alongside the Anbu she had sent to get him. "You called, Ba-chan?" "Yes, I did," Tsunade said, causing Naruto to frown. "Thank you for getting here so promptly," she informed the Anbu, who gave a nod and vanished upon using the Shunshin again. "Sit down, Naruto." Still looking a little unsure, Naruto did as told and took a seat in one of the two chairs in front of the desk. "I'm sure you're wondering why I called you here," Tsunade said after a moment before taking a quick sip of her sake. Naruto, still confused, nodded. "A while back we managed to acquire some information on your blood test that can and likely will cause a good deal of commotion if it ever gets out. It also changes a good deal between us." "Then what I have is a bloodline?" asked Naruto. "Yes," Tsunade said, "it is a bloodline. I believe it came from a combination of your Uzumaki blood and your father's blood." "My old man," Naruto frowned. "What does he have to do with this?" "As far as I am aware, he was not a part of any clan." "And as far as we were aware, he was not either," Tsunade said. "Recent information from your blood test, however, has shed some light on things. Namikaze Minato was an orphan as far as anyone knew. There are no records of his parents in any of our files, however, I am beginning to believe that is because they were stricken from his profile by Sarutobi-sensei. It must be pretty important if Hokage Ojisan needed to erase the information," Naruto noted. "It is." Tsunade took a deep breath, then blew it all out in a sigh. "I'm not going to beat around the bush, Naruto. When we ran the blood test, we did a much more extensive test than the one to simply see if you had a bloodline. This test showed us a number of information that goes beyond blood type and genetics. Through it, we would have been able to find out who your grandparents and great-grandparents were so long as we had a sample of their blood on record. I take it this has something to do with my grandparents, then?" Naruto frowned in thought as he was finally given a bit more information on what this meeting was about. "Just one of them," Tsunade informed him, "your grandfather on your father's side. You see, I discovered that your grandfather is, in fact, my deceased younger brother, Senju Nawaki." Naruto's mouth dropped. "Naruto, your father was actually my nephew, which makes you my grandnephew." With the bomb dropped, Tsunade waited for the other shoe to fall. She expected a number of things to happen after Naruto recovered from his shock. Anger at leaving him alone for so long, rage at how he was treated by the villagers. She expected him to shout at her, to yell and scream about how she should have been there for him, and she felt he would be right to do so. Clearly, she let her own anxiety get the best of her. "You do know that you can no longer complain about me calling you Ba-chan, right?" Tsunade blinked. "What?" Naruto grinned. "You can't get upset when I call you Ba-chan anymore. Technically speaking, you kind of are my Ba-chan since we're related and all." "Naruto," now it was Tsunade's turn to gawk, "I just told you that you and I are closely related and all you can say is that I can't complain about you calling me Ba-chan?" "So?" Naruto looked at her, confused. "I don't really see your point. This doesn't change anything." "Doesn't change anything?" Tsunade parroted in shock. "Aren't you? You should be mad? You're related to me and I wasn't there for you. I've known about this for months, but kept it from you because of my own fear and selfish desire to keep the status quo." "I'm still not seeing the problem," Naruto admitted with a shrug. "As far as I can see, you only found out after I returned to the village, which means you did not know we were family before then. I'm not sure how I can blame you for not being there for me when you didn't even know we were family." "So you're not mad at me?" asked Tsunade, still reeling from shock. "Of course not," Naruto scoffed, "being upset at you for not knowing something is stupid. Why would I blame you for being ignorant? That would be like how the villagers blamed me for everything the Kyuubi did when I was younger." "Thank you," Tsunade whispered, trying not to let the tears fall from her eyes. Naruto rolled his eyes. "Don't get all wishy-washy on me. Aren't you old hags supposed to be tough?" His question was answered when Tsunade threw an empty sake bottle at his head. Watch it, brat. Tsunade scowled. I may let you get away with calling me Ba-chan from now on, but there is no way I'm going to let you call me an old hag without suffering the consequences. Geez, you're so violent, Naruto muttered. Aren't the Senju supposed to be peace-loving hippies or something? Tsunade snorted. Only when you don't piss us off. Then we become the devil incarnate. Right, Naruto nodded his head, pleased to see that he had dispelled the aura of doom and gloom surrounding Tsunade. Now, this information is interesting and all, but I do have a question. Tsunade raised an eyebrow. Which is, how did Nawaki have a kid? Wasn't he, like, 12 or something? 13, Tsunade corrected, and yes, he was too young to have a child. However, Orochimaru was his sensei. And you believe that he may have taken samples of Nawaki during that time? Or sometime after, Tsunade replied. I don't want to believe that he was experimenting that early on, but it's not outside of the realm of possibility that he injected a woman with Nawaki's seed and tried to observe her when she got pregnant. It's also very likely she died at childbirth, as there are no records of who Minato's mother was. She was likely a random civilian that Orochimaru had selected for that very same reason. Less chance of people noticing her that way, especially during times of war. Makes sense, Naruto nodded his head. Naruto, Tsunade began again, a tremor in her voice. Are you really okay with this? Eh? Naruto looked confused, but then shrugged. I don't see why not. I mean, we're already pretty much family, right? Might as well make it official. I see, Tensade had to smile at his words as she remembered another reason she liked the blonde so much. He didn't just remind her of her little brother and late lover, he was also an amazing person capable of accepting others no matter what and always tried to look on the bright side of things. She was about to say more, but before she could even open her mouth, the door to her room was blasted open and one of her ninja was leaning against the door jamb, huffing and puffing like he had just run a marathon. You had better have a good reason for barging in like this. Tsunade scowled at the man, who shrank a bit but did not waver. It's Kumogakure. The man rasped, his breathing still heavy. We just received news that it was destroyed by Akatsuki. What? Chapter 27, Approaching Tempest. Morning in Kirigakure came as the sun rose over the horizon. With the first rays of light shining across the large coalition of islands, a number of people began to wake up, getting themselves ready to start another day. Bakers began baking their goods. Merchants started to set up shop, and a number of shinobi could be seen traveling across the roofs of buildings. A light breeze blew through the hidden village, carrying with it the scent of the sea. It was this scent that caused Ni Yugito to stir from her slumber. Cracking a single eye open, the young woman with long blonde hair quickly shut it again as several rays of light streaming in through the nearest window hit her eyes. Groaning, she rolled onto her side and shut her eyes again, determined to get a few more minutes of sleep before starting her day. It wasn't like she had anything pressing to do right now anyways. As she rolled over, her right hand came into contact with something that caused her to pause. It was soft, and round, and squishy. She recognized what it was, even in her semi-conscious state. Opening both eyes, the first thing Yugito saw was the mass of red hair. It was spread across the bed, looking almost like wildfire as the sunlight hit it. The second thing she saw was the woman that hair belonged to, a beautiful woman with a figure that rivaled her own, and a face that held a sensual elegance about it. Even when she was at rest, the woman looked positively alluring, with her eyes closed and her lips parted ever so slightly, just begging someone to plant a kiss on them. Yugito shook her head of such thoughts, but could not deny it had entered her mind. The last thing the blonde-haired Jinchuriki noticed was that her hand was on the woman's right breast. Yugito blinked several times, wondering what she should do. After a moment's thought, she decided to slowly take her hand off Mei's well-formed chest so as not to wake her. You can leave it there if you want. Startled, Yugito tilted her head to see that Mei was already awake. The woman's sea-green eyes were staring at her with a mixture of amusement and mischief that reminded her a lot of the man they were going to marry. Maybe that was the reason she had allowed this woman to convince her to share a bed. I didn't want to wake you, Yugito said, letting her hand come back down to rest on Mei's bare bosom. I've been awake for a while, Mei admitted. The woman with gloriously long red hair allowed her own hand to rest on Yugito's. I don't really feel like getting up right now though, so I decided to relax a bit. I don't think that's really something a cage should say, Yugito teased. People will accuse you of being lazy. It was interesting for Yugito to realize how at ease she was with the other woman. Maybe it was because they had shared a sexual encounter with each other during the prelims when they both had sex with Naruto. In fact, she was sure that was the reason. Still, it did not change how fascinating the thought of her and this woman being more involved with each other than was necessary was to the blonde beauty. They can say whatever they want, Mei countered. I don't really care, though I doubt anyone would actually complain. With Mizu no Kuni at peace, I don't have as much to do anymore. Relatively speaking, at least, especially when compared to immediately after the war when they were rebuilding the nation. The process of not only rebuilding her shinobi forces after having them nearly cut in half, but also aiding the civilians regain their livelihood, and rebuilding Kirigakure from all the damage it had taken during the war had been a very long and arduous process. It was fortunate they had the full support of the daimyo in this, or the process would have taken much longer than 2 years. That sounds like an excuse to me, Yugito mumbled. Despite saying this, the blonde-haired beauty scooted closer to Mei, allowing their equally nude bodies to conform as she used the redhead's bosom as a pillow. It's only an excuse when there is actually work to do, Mei countered as she pulled the slightly younger woman closer. Cuddling with Yugito wasn't the same as cuddling with Naruto, but for the moment, both of them were willing to content themselves with each other. I can afford to rest for a few more minutes. Yugito moaned slightly as she relaxed into the other woman's embrace. Her eyes closed again as warmth seeped into her body. She allowed herself this small moment of peace and quiet to last for several seconds before speaking again. So what do we have to do today? There are only a few more formalities to worry about before we can finalize the alliance between Kumo and Kiri. Great. It shouldn't take longer than an hour or two. Mei ignored the sarcasm in Yugito's voice. The council is only procrastinating because that's how they work. They want this alliance to happen just as much as we do, since it will mean securing both our northern and eastern borders from intrusion. Once that happens, we'll officially be allies with both Konoha and Kumo. In Suna, Yugito added. In Suna, Mei agreed, though the desert nation was not really important to Kiri, being too far away for them to really affect her village. A thoughtful hum escaped her lips. Once the alliance is finalized, we'll become the largest coalition of allied shinobi villages in the elemental nations. Not to mention the most powerful. Yugito could not help but agree. An alliance between Konoha, Kiri, Kumo, and Suna would make them the largest and most powerful group of allied villages. That was 4 of the 5 great shinobi nations. That was a lot of firepower to bring down. We're going to ruffle some feathers when the alliance becomes official. Mei nearly snorted. We've already ruffled quite a few feathers. Some of the smaller countries have learned of the alliance and are getting restless. They won't do anything though, they know that if they were to start anything they would be crushed. The minor villages were much smaller than their counterparts in the 5 great nations. Plus their forces were not as well trained due to their lack of funding. A war against one nation of Kiri's size would be costly, a war against 4 was suicidal. Do we know what Iwe has to say about all this? No, Mei shook her head at Yugito's question. Iwe has been silent since several of their ninja went rogue and attempted to use Koyuki as a hostage to kill Naruto. They cannot afford to make any moves right now, though I do not doubt they know about the alliance. It wasn't like they had tried keeping it a secret. Every village worth their weight likely knew about the upcoming new battles between Naruto, Mei and Yugito. It wasn't as publicized as Naruto's close friendship with Koyuki, but it wasn't like they had done anything to hide it either. Yugito did not say anything, merely absorbed the information to the best of her abilities. As a shinobi of Kumo, and one of its Jinchuriki at that, she had not really had to worry about the politics between the villages like this before. She wasn't like Mei, who had to worry about running a village, or Naruto, who was the head of 2 nearly extinct clans. She was just a ninja with a giant chakra entity sealed inside of her. As such, these political concepts were a little more difficult for her to grasp. It was while Yugito was trying to work her way through the knowledge her fellow sister wife had given her that Naruto appeared before them within a Hiraishin. Both Yugito's and Mei's eyes lit up when they saw the man they were to marry, but soon realized something was wrong when he did not smile at them. In fact, he looked rather grave. Koi, Mei spoke up, disentangling herself from Yugito to stand up, heedless of her own nudity. What's wrong? Naruto said nothing as he walked over to them. Yugito also made to stand. She was only given enough time to sit up, however, before her husband to be sat down on the bed and pulled her into a hug. I'm sorry, he said, his voice a mere whisper. I am so sorry. Yugito did not know what was going on, but a feeling of dread began to well up inside of her, along with confusion. Why was he saying this? What was he sorry about? She pushed Naruto back a little so she could look at him. The pit in her stomach increased when she saw the despondency on his face. Naruto. Why are you sorry? What's wrong? When Naruto bit his lip, Yugito knew that she would not like his answer. She had no idea how right she was. Breaking the news of Kumo's destruction to Yugito had been much harder than Naruto thought it would be. No amount of preparation could have prepared him for the anguish this knowledge would have given the woman he shared so much in common with. The look on her face when he told her, that tormented expression she had given him was something that would remain with him for the rest of his life. Several hours had passed since then. Mei was off in a meeting with her council. As much as she would have liked to remain and help Naruto comfort her distraught sister-wife, she couldn't neglect her duties as the Mizukage. She had left the man they both loved to comfort Yugito, holding her in his arms as she cried out her anguish and rage to the world. It was the only thing he could do in this situation, and it left him feeling powerless. What kind of fiancé was he that the only thing he could do was console his inconsolable significant other? He should have tried to kill pain when he had the chance. Had he done that, none of this would have happened. Yugito wouldn't be mourning the loss of her village and he wouldn't have to deal with this feeling of helplessness and guilt. The Jinchuriki for the two-tailed Nekomata had fallen asleep several minutes ago, having expended all of her energy crying and screaming out her denial, shock, sorrow, and anger to the world. She was sitting sideways in Naruto's lap as he sat on the bed, his back against the headboard. His arms were wrapped around her in a tight embrace, as if he were trying to shield her from the world. Her head was tucked neatly in the crook of his neck as he rested his chin on the crown of her head. It was about midday now, which Naruto noted when he looked out the window and saw the sun shining high overhead, sending beams of light down on the world below. From his position on the bed, the blonde Uzumaki Namikaze was able to clearly make out the people of the village hidden in the mist as they went about their business, ignorant and unknowing of the tragedy that had just taken place. Naruto felt a dissonance between the world around him and his own broiling emotions. A day in which something so horrifically tragic happens should not be this bright and lively. The sound of the door clicking open took his attention off his desolate thoughts, something he was grateful for. Looking up as someone entered the room, Naruto was greeted with the sight of Mei Terumi walking over to him. "How is she?" was the first thing Mei asked as she sat down at the edge of the bed. Naruto's eyes traveled down to where he could see the shimmering blonde hair of Yugito. He could not see anything else right now, but he knew that if he were to get a glimpse of her face he would see red-rimmed eyes and tear-stained cheeks. "I think the answer to that should be more than obvious," he said softly, shifting as he tightened his hold on the blonde woman in his arms. "Right. Foolish question, I know." Mei scooted further onto the bed, moving to rest against the headboard right next to him. She grabbed Yugito's calves, lifting them up so she could scoot under them and then set them back down on her lap. Her hands traveled up and down the other woman's legs, which caused the female Jinchuriki to purr lightly in her sleep. It was the only form of comfort the redhead could offer right now. "How did the council take this news?" asked Naruto after several minutes of silence. "About as well as can be expected," Mei said with a heavy sigh. "They're afraid. It seems that news of Kumo's destruction has reached all corners of the elemental nations, as well as the knowledge that one of the 5 great hidden villages was wiped out by a single person. It's only natural they would be afraid of someone with that kind of power." "Yeah, is something wrong, Koi?" Naruto shook his head. "Not really, it's just," the blonde-haired Uzumaki grimaced. "I can't help but feel like this is my fault. If I had just killed Pain when I had the chance. If I hadn't run when I confronted him in aim, then none of this would have happened. Yugito wouldn't be distraught and Kumo would still be standing. But your sensei would have been dead," Mei pointed out. "I love Jiraiya like a father, but the life of one man isn't worth that of the thousands who are likely dead now thanks to Pain." It was a harsh thing to say, callous almost, especially coming from Naruto. But as shinobi, both he and Mei knew that sacrifices were sometimes necessary no matter how much they hated that aspect of their lives. How many people lost fathers, mothers, sons and daughters in that attack? Is my happiness worth the happiness of all those who lost loved ones of their own? He looked back down at Yugito. Is it worth her happiness? Mei did not answer his question. They both knew the answer, and she knew that, regardless of what she told him, Naruto would blame himself. She tried another approach. Do you think you could have beaten him? I don't know. Naruto bit his lip. Maybe. Pain was able to beat Jiraiya-sensei. My strength is comparable, but we never went all out in our spars, so there's no telling who was the stronger between the two of us. Still, Pain was injured from his battle. I saw that at least one of his paths had been destroyed. I also know how his paths work. I know their weaknesses, their strengths. All he likely knows about me is my affinity for wind jutsu, my use of the Hiraishin, and that I can summon toads. I had all the advantages and yet I still retreated. Oh Naruto. Mei's eyes softened as she looked at the man she was to wed. He looked so despondent right now. That damn noble streak of his was acting up again, making him blame himself for Kumo's destruction even though there was no way he could have known this would happen. Unable to do anything else, Mei let her head rest on his shoulder and pulled herself as close to him as possible. Right now this was the only thing she could do. Naruto was jolted awake as the blonde-haired beauty in his arms stirred. Looking down he watched as Yugito sniffled a bit. He could not see her face, but he imagined she didn't look too pleasant right now. Yugito. Her head lifting a bit, Yugito looked up at Naruto, who winced. When he pictured how horrible she would look he had really been underestimating just how bad it was. Yugito's eyes were bloodshot and puffy from her tears. Her cheeks had tear tracks staining them. There was even a little fluid running down her nose. Naruto. Yugito's voice cracked as she spoke, as if she had not used it for a long time. How are you feeling? Awful. Yugito buried her face in his chest. Her arms wove tightly around his torso, holding onto him like some kind of lifeline as her entire body went into a fit of shuddering. In return Naruto's arms held her tightly, trying to give her as much comfort as he could with the gesture. The pair were silent for a moment, a long moment that seemed to stretch on without end. But end it did when Yugito spoke again. I'm not dreaming, am I? She asked, her voice soft, conveying with it an anguish and sadness that Naruto felt did not belong in her voice. This is really happening. Kumo was destroyed. I'm sorry. Naruto knew his words meant nothing, but he couldn't help but apologize. It was his fault Kumo was destroyed. Had he just killed Pain when he had the chance this wouldn't have happened. I can't believe it's gone, Yugito mumbled. Kumo was my home. I grew up there my whole life and the shinobi I worked with were always so kind to me, treating me like somebody important instead of scorn like most Jinchuriki are treated in their own village. A stifled sob escaped her lips. Naruto could feel several tears dampen his shirt. They didn't deserve to die. No, they didn't, Naruto agreed. I wish I could say something that would help ease your pain, but I've never had this happen to me before. I've never lost so much in such a short amount of time. I can't even begin to imagine how you must feel right now. I'm sorry. I wish I could do something for you. Just hold me, Yugito told him, just like this. Hold me and tell me you'll always be with me. Promise me you won't leave me. Naruto felt like someone had stabbed him in the heart. The woman who had always been so strong, both in spirit and body, was gone. The woman he had grown to love so much sounded more like a weak little girl than a strong-spirited kunoichi. It was enough to break Naruto's heart. I promise, he said even though he knew this was one of the few promises he should not make. There was no guarantee he could keep it. But he also knew how fragile Yugito's state currently was. The mere fact that she was even asking him to make this promise when she knew as well as he that the life of a shinobi was oftentimes short and violent told him this. She needed some reassurance, even if it ended up being false assurances. Right now she needed something to hold on to. So he wrapped his arms tightly around his fellow Jinchuriki and gave her the words she wanted to know, the words she needed to hear. I promise, I'll never leave you. I'll stay with you forever and a day. And you know how I am with promises. If I make a promise, you'll never break it because that's your nindo. Yugito and Naruto were almost startled when another voice spoke up. But they relaxed when a second set of arms wrapped around them both, holding onto them just as tightly as they held each other. I also promise to stay with you, Yugito, Mei promised the other woman, kissing the blonde on the temple. Yugito allowed her body to relax into the combined embrace of Mei and Naruto, her eyes closing and her body slowly beginning to shut down once more. She was still tired, oh so tired. She needed more rest. Thank you, she whispered softly before falling asleep within the embrace of the two people who meant the world to her. The day after Yugito and Mei received the news of Kumo's destruction, the trio found themselves standing outside of Kirigakure's gates, waiting. They had received a message sometime last night from Tsunade that a response and rescue team made up of Suna and Konoha Shinobi and Haru no Kuni samurai would be coming to pick them up before setting out for Kumogakure. They would be arriving sometime that morning. And so they stood there, silently waiting as the sun rose over the horizon and painted both the sky and ocean with brilliant splashes of color. It was a positively cheerful day, a stark contrast to the trio of ninja who waited with the Kirigakure squadron that would be joining them on this expedition. One of Naruto's arm was wrapped around Yugito's waist. He had not let go of the woman since the news had been released. Even when they ate, the pair stayed in constant physical contact, with his fellow blonde sitting on his lap. Yugito did not seem to be in any rush to have this end. Even though she knew it was a crutch to rely on Naruto for strength, right now she needed his strength because she did not have any of her own at the moment. Especially with what they were going to be doing, where they would be going. The young woman knew she would need all the strength she could get if she wanted to see what remained of Kumo with her own eyes. The group did not have to wait long. A mere 30 minutes after they arrived at the gates with the small contingent of Kiri Shinobi that were to be accompanying them did a deep thrumming sound from above them, growing louder with each passing moment. As when the group looked up to see a speck appear in the distance. It was too far for most shinobi to see, but came closer with each passing second. One speck soon became two as the objects continued sailing through the air. The unidentified flying objects eventually became large enough that everyone could make them out in more detail. They were large, oblong objects with complex multi-plane fins. The way they glistened in the light let everyone know they were made from some kind of alloy. The skeletal structure seemed to consist of several rings and longitudinal girders. The two flying objects were being propelled from the back by several engines, mounted in gondolas, or engine cars, which were built into the structural skeleton. A comparatively small compartment was built into the bottom of the large, cylindrical objects with tapered ends. No doubt it was where all of the passengers were located. So that's Haru no Kuni's new zeppelins, Mei said, intrigued and awed by the massive flying ships. Even Yugito had snapped out of her current depression to gape at the large vessels as they set down a couple meters away. I had heard they were impressive to see, but I didn't expect them to be so massive. Haru no Kuni has always been well known for their advanced technology, Naruto said as he and the others began walking towards the zeppelins. The doors on the massive metal monstrosities opened up and a boarding ramp was soon lowered. This is their latest invention. I'm told it was based off the smaller blimps that Dodo created several years back. As the group neared the zeppelins, two squads of shinobi from Konoha and Suna emerged from the massive floating ships. Naruto smiled when he saw who was there to greet them. Shikamaru, Sakura, Ino, Choji. He greeted the four who gave their own greetings in turn. Troublesome. This is so troublesome. Shikamaru grunted as Ino elbowed him. Anyways, we're not the only squads here, but we're in charge of this mission. He rubbed his torso. We've got several more squads and one squad of Anbu from both Konoha and Suna. Naruto nodded, then looked at the Suna contingent. Temari, Kankuro, I didn't expect Gaara to send you too. Gaara actually wanted to come himself, but we convinced him otherwise. Temari looked at the group, her eyes surveying both Mei and Yugito for a second before moving back to Naruto. It took us a lot of effort to keep him from leaving. It's probably a good thing that you did, Naruto frowned. With what's happened, Suna is probably the safest place for him right now. Yeah, because Kumo didn't just get turned into a smoking crater by one guy. Oof. Kankuro. Temari hissed at her younger brother as she retracted her elbow from his torso. The hell was that for, sis? Asked Kankuro as he rubbed his now sore ribs. Temari just glared at him before pointing at the three people in front of them. When he turned his head, it was to the sight of Naruto and Mei glaring daggers at him while Yugito had buried her face in the blonde Uzumaki's shoulder. Ah, ah ha ha ha, ha, ha. Kankuro laughed nervously, trying not to shrink in on himself at the sight of two cage-level ninja shooting him looks that could melt steel. Considering one of them actually could melt steel and the other was rumored to be one of the most powerful shinobi in the elemental nations, his attempts failed epically. In other words, Kankuro looked about ready to shit himself. I'm really sorry about that. That was totally callous of me. It won't happen again. The puppet user gulped nervously when he saw Naruto's lips thin into a tight, white line. Kankuro got the distinct feeling that the only reason the young clan heir had not pummeled him was because of the blonde chick he was currently holding in his arms. Even that may not have been enough to save him, but help came to him however inadvertently from a very unexpected source. Naruto-kun. Descending from the ramp of the second blimp was none other than Koyuki Kazuhana, the daimyo to Yuki no Kuni and another one of Naruto's wives. Though only Naruto and Koyuki's sister wives knew that. As was per usual when she was out in public, Koyuki was decked out in very regal garb, a thick blue kimono with light red accents and voluminous sleeves. Her hair had been styled in a pair of loops that swung behind her as she walked. Ran towards them. The young woman, in her haste, seemed to have forgone any sense of decorum and had broken rank from the samurai surrounding her in order to full-on sprint towards Naruto and the group. Yuki, Naruto greeted with a smile. Koyuki looked like she wanted to jump on him as she stopped in front of them, but withheld herself when she saw Yugito in his arms. How have you been? It's been a while since we saw each other. About a month all told. Naruto had been so busy recently that he'd been unable to visit her weekly like he would have preferred. Busy, Koyuki said. There's a lot of work involved in running a country, you know? He did know. She complained about it to him often enough. I'm surprised you're here then. I may have used this as an excuse to take a small break, Koyuki admitted shamelessly as her contingent of samurai caught up to her. But I thought you guys could use my help. She looked at Yugito, her eyes dimming a bit before they flickered back to Naruto. I wanted to lend whatever aid I could. We could use a hand, actually, Naruto said, thank you. Koyuki smiled at him, but was interrupted from saying anything when the captain of the samurai contingent with her spoke up. Koyuki Dono, while we are among allies here, I would like to request that you not run off like that again. Rolling her eyes, Koyuki said, oh relax, Aizen. No one would dare attack me here, not with 3 cage-level ninja, 2 squads of shinobi and a contingent of Haru no Kuni samurai. It would be suicide. Nevertheless, I would like to ask that you show a bit more caution, the man replied smoothly, his voice both articulate and concerned. It would not do for rumors to spread around about you. This time, Koyuki scowled. I do not care about rumors, you know that, and it's already a well-established fact that Naruto is one of my closest friends. If people want to talk about us, then let them. You would also do well to remember your station. You may be one of the best captains of my guard, but I will not put up with you disrespecting me like that. As Koyuki argued with the head of her guard, Naruto found himself studying the older male. He was a very scholarly-looking man, with square-rimmed glasses and brown eyes and hair. This did not fool Naruto though, who knew the man was very capable. He wouldn't be wearing the white haori of a guard captain over the chakra armor that all members of the Haru no Kuni guard wear if he wasn't. Aizen Suseke was one of the newer members of Koyuki's guard detail. He had risen through the ranks from a lowly soldier relatively quickly after joining. Naruto knew this was because he had trained in Tetsu no Kuni, the land where powerful samurai are in abundance. While he had never seen the man in action, it was said that Aizen had mastered the art of Iaido and channeling chakra through his swords to enhance their power at a very young age. I don't think he's disrespecting you, Yuki-chan. Naruto placed his free hand on her shoulder. He's merely concerned about your well-being. Thank you, Naruto-san. Oh fine, Koyuki rolled her eyes. I'll be more careful and not run off anymore. There, you happy now? Very. This is so troublesome, Shikamaru murmured again as he scratched the back of his head, his eyes blinking lazily. Look, I don't want to interrupt you guys, he paused, actually I do. This situation is troublesome enough without all this quarreling. Anyway, we really should get a move on. Don't be rude, Shikamaru. Ino jabbed her friend and Chunin commander in the gut with her elbow. Shikamaru grunted and rubbed his now sore stomach, but didn't react to the blonde girl's maneuver otherwise. He is right though, Sakura said, we really do need to get moving. The more time we spend here, the more likely it is that we'll be unable to find anyone to save. At the reminder that they were going to Kumo in order to rescue any survivors, Yugito perked up. "They're right," she said softly, stepping away from Naruto's comforting embrace to stand on her own. "We really do need to leave." "Yugito." Naruto stared at the woman's eyes as they quivered. "Are you going to be alright?" "Yes, She bit her lip. "I need to go there. To see what happened to it, my home." "I understand." Koyuki clapped her hands together, "and in that case, we should get a move on. Yugito, you'll be coming in my Zeppelin." With that she grabbed the blonde girl by the arm and began gently guiding her to the Zeppelin she came out of. As they began walking off, Koyuki turned to look at Naruto. "I'll leave you to commune with your friends and come up with a plan of action for this rescue operation. Yugito and I have some girl things to talk about." "Girl things?" Naruto blinked. "What kind of? You know what? Never mind. I don't want to know." He waved them off. "Have fun. Don't worry, we will." Yugito allowed Koyuki to guide her along as they walked down the halls of the Zeppelin. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. The walkways were made of metal and their footsteps created a series of loud clangs on the floor. Like the floors, the walls were also metal, and their polished surface gleamed brightly from the overhead lights. The glare they reflected caused Yugito to wince as it hit her overly sensitive eyes. The group soon arrived at a set of double doors at the end of the hall. They looked much more majestic than the rest of the hall. Dark red wood polished to a shine with golden inlays in rose patterns running along the edges. It and the crest of the Kazuhana family on each door presented an ornate appearance that managed to keep from looking overly ostentatious. "This is my personal flagship," Koyuki told Yugito when she saw the older woman staring at her door. "Whenever I travel by air I use this Zeppelin." "I see. Let's go." As two of the samurai in Koyuki's escort detail opened the door, the woman in question led Yugito into the room. The inside was just as beautiful as the door, though it was a bit more austere than the blonde Jinchuriki had expected. Aside from the plush, royal purple carpet and wooden panels along the wall, the only other decor inside was the large bed, a desk, a dresser, a changing area blocked off by screens, and a mirror with ornately woven framework. "Why don't you sit on the bed while I get changed into something a little more comfortable?" Koyuki asked to Yugito as she walked towards the dresser where she began pulling out several articles of clothing. Of course, saying that she asked Yugito was a bit of an euphemism. When a daimyo asks you anything, it is more like an order most of the time, even if you were in with the daimyo doing to asking. Thus, Yugito sat down on the bed. "Why did you want me to come with you?" asked Yugito as Koyuki moved behind the changing screens and began getting dressed in a new set of clothes. "We're both going to marry Naruto, but we hardly get to see each other," Koyuki said as if it was the reason was obvious. Seconds later, the daimyo Toharu no Kuni emerged wearing a pair of light blue flannel pants and a long sleeve shirt. "I thought this would be a good time to get to know you a bit better. Plus." Koyuki walked over to the bed and sat down right next to the other woman. Yugito watched her move. It was true she did not know the woman before her very well. They had only met a few times because Naruto's real relationship with Koyuki was still a closely guarded secret. Only her most loyal advisors and sister wives knew they were more than just close friends. It was this lack of knowledge about the woman before her that would probably best explain why she was so surprised when Koyuki pulled her into a hug. "I also wanted you to know that I understand how you feel," Koyuki said to the stunned Yugito, who merely blinked as she found her head resting against the other woman's bosom. "I remember when my uncle usurped my father's throne, killing him and forcing me to flee everything I ever knew. While my country was still there, I could never go back to it because I knew he would kill me if I did. I remember how hard it was knowing that I would never be able to see my father again, never visit my country again. It was so difficult that there were times I just wanted to give up." Koyuki paused, gathering her thoughts. Naruto, try as he might, can't understand what it's like to lose everything you've ever loved. A hand came up and gently brushed through Yugito's hair. "But I do. And I know that sometimes you need a shoulder to cry and a person who can understand what you're going through to truly help. I'm sure you already feel like you've cried enough tears, but if you think you've got any more left, now is probably the best time to get them out." It started with a stifled sob, then turned into a trickle of tears, before becoming a torrential downpour. As she was held in the arms of one of her fellow sister wives, Yugito cried tears of anguish and pain. Pain watched as the Gedo Mazo greedily sucked out the Hachibi's chakra from its host. The chakra of the Biju had engulfed its host, who was still unconscious, and a long tendril had snaked its way to the mouth of the Gedo. As the earthen-colored, decayed-looking statue with spiky protrusions on its back continued its task, one of the 9 eyes on its head began to slowly open. When the eye had opened fully, the task was finished, and Killer Bee was dropped unceremoniously to the ground where he lay still. Man! A sigh came from Kisame. That was a lot harder than it used to be. With only 4 of us left, it took more than twice the time it usually did. The silhouetted figure of the most notorious criminal in Kirigakure looked at the now empty hands where the other members used to stand during this procedure. Dedera and Sasori, the zombie brothers, Itachi and now Konan. Maybe we should think about getting new members. Oh, new members sounds good. Right now there are no ninja who meet the qualifications we are looking for in members of Akatsuki, Pain said without hesitation. None of the current ninja save the cages can possibly stand up to a Biju. That's too bad. Toby wanted to make more friends. Pain frowned at Madara, but didn't say anything about his stupid acting. There were more important matters that they needed to attend to. While it's a little early, I believe the time has come for us to declare war on the elemental nations. War, eh? Kisame gave a fanged grin. And how are we gonna do that? We don't have all the Biju yet, and with only 4 members I don't see how we're going to be able to do much. Zetsu, Pain turned to the plant-like being with a white and dark half. I want you to get in touch with the smaller nations' hidden villages. Get them to agree to meet me. Tell them the time has come for the smaller nations to rise up against the 5 great villages. If they are not convinced, inform them that I was the one who destroyed Kumo. Of course, Leader Sama, Zetsu's white half said. Don't worry, we'll get it done, the black half added. So we're gonna be using the smaller nations to fight? Kisame rubbed his chin. It's not a bad idea, but we're still outnumbered 20-1. It will be fine, Pain said. None of those arrayed against us can oppose the will of God. The sight that greeted them as their zeppelins reached Kumo was one that none of them could expect. It was a horrendous sight. The rocky spires of the mountain range that Kumogakure no Sato had been built upon were gone, the entire mountain range having collapsed. The once great village was now nothing more than a pile of rubble and debris. Naruto grit his teeth at the destruction done. Had anyone survived that? Could anyone survive the decimation of an entire mountain range? Once more the weight of his failures struck him with guilt. It's not a very pretty sight, is it? A soft voice asked in his ear. Naruto turned his head to see Yugao, decked out in her Enbu uniform, staring down at the village through the glass window. She had her mask on, so he could not see her face, but he could imagine the expression she was wearing. It was likely a mirror image of his own. It's a lot worse than I thought it would be, Naruto grimaced as he thought about the man who had done this. That kind of power is unfathomable for anything except a Biju. I had heard that Madara and Hashirama were able to cause this level of devastation whenever they fought, but for someone to be capable of leveling an entire mountain range in this day and age is unbelievable. Such is the power of one who wields the Rinnegan, even if it is a mock imitation of the one the Rikudo Sennin had. So this is the power of the Rinnegan? I hadn't realized it was so godlike? Do not be fooled, this level of destruction is not that of a god's. I could do this easily with an Amari, but it's definitely something within the Rinnegan's capabilities. The Rikudo Sennin's Rinnegan was so powerful he was able to create the moon you see floating overhead every night. That is the power of a true god. Naruto said nothing to Kyuubi's praise of the Rikudo Sennin's powers. If there was one thing he had learned about the 9-tailed entity sealed inside of him, it was that the only human he seemed to hold any respect for was the man who had been hailed as the creator of ninjutsu, though the whisker-marked young man had no idea why. Are the teams ready? He asked out loud. Yes, Yugao answered smartly. They're all ready and awaiting your orders. Good. Naruto turned from the sight of the destroyed mountain range. He didn't want to see it anymore, not when he would be getting an up-close glimpse of it soon enough. Then let's go. Hi. Hoshigaki Kisame stopped walking as the sun overhead began to set. Glancing around, all he could see were trees, their trunks so thick and the interweaving branches creating an overlapping network so complex and intermingled that he could not see anything past them. His senses told him there was no one else around for miles, no enemies at least, and while he was not a very good sensor, he had come to trust his instincts. So what do you think about all that? Kisame asked of no one in particular. Pain declaring war on the 5 great nations? Foolish, a voice spoke up from behind him. There was a rustling of bushes and leaves as Kisame turned around to see the man known as Tobi walk out from behind a tree. But it serves our purpose well enough. With everyone's eyes on Pain, it'll allow us to claim the remaining Biju. The Nanabi, the Nibi, and of course, that Namikaze Gaki, Kisame grinned. Fighting that brat's going to be a blast. As if he were already anticipating a good fight, Kisame reached for the handle of Shamahada and gripped it tightly. We're not going after the Nibi or the Kyuubi just yet, Tobi informed him. Now that Kumo has been destroyed, going after them is going to be difficult. I doubt they'll be separated anytime soon, and taking on the Nibi with Namikaze there will be nearly impossible. At my current level, I'm not sure I could beat him. He must really be something if you're admitting that, Kisame observed. He is his father's son. Several birds chirped as they flew through the trees. Kisame placed a hand against his shoulder, cracking his neck several times. So what is it you want me to do? Pain is going to be busy preparing for war, Tobi began. He won't have time to watch your movements, and with Konan turning traitor he's lost his second set of eyes. You'll be able to move around much more freely from now on. Good to know, but what do you want me to do? I've just received a report that the Kyuubi has left Konoha for Kumo and taken many of Konoha's ninja in the hopes of finding survivors from Pain's attack. At least 6 squads containing some of Konoha's best and brightest are now gone, including the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. I want you to head to Konoha and capture the Nanabi. She's living in the Namikaze estate, but spends most of her time within the Aburame clan grounds. So I'm capturing another Jinchuriki, eh? Kisame grinned a shark-like grin. And on my own this time too. Sounds fun. Be sure not to cause too much of a commotion, Tobi added. We cannot afford to lose another member. Zetsu will be helping you on this mission. He shall create a distraction for you. Zetsu, huh? So we're doing that, then? Yes. It's a little earlier than I wanted, but circumstances have dictated that we unleash Zetsu sooner than I had anticipated. Kisame nodded. He was curious to know what Tobi needed to do in Konoha, but honestly didn't care enough to ask. It wasn't like he would receive an answer anyways. Within the Hokage's office, one Godem Hokage sat behind her desk, working on a large stack of papers. There were currently 2 different stacks, one of the unsigned petitions and reports she had yet to look over, and another for those papers she had already finished. The stack containing unfinished paperwork was the larger of the 2. The day had hardly even started and yet Tsunade was already stressing out, though on this day it had very little to do with the fact that she had more paperwork than she usual. Indeed, it had nothing to do with the paperwork at all. She had just received a report that the airships containing Naruto, Yugito and the joint Konoha, Kiri, Suna, Haru forces had set down near Kumo and would begin looking for survivors. While that was all well and good, the report had also included a very detailed description of what happened to Kumo. An entire village gone. No, not just gone. Turned into nothing more than a large crater in the ground. Even the mountains the once proud village had been situated in were no more. Tsunade shuddered at the thought of someone who had that kind of power at their disposal. What kind of inhuman being had the power to destroy an entire village on their own? Tsunade-sama. Blinking, Tsunade looked up to see Konan standing in front of her desk. With Naruto off on a mission, his lover had decided to lend herself as Tsunade's aide, something the busty Hokage was thankful for as Shizune was needed at the hospital. The beautiful Kunoichi with blue hair and amber eyes had a scroll in her hand, which she handed off to the busty Hokage. Another report? She asked, opening the scroll and reading its contents. A frown crossed her face. This is a report from one of our guard stations on the eastern border. She looked up at Konan. I'm not sure why you felt this was important enough to give to me. It may be nothing, but that report came in 2 hours later than it should have, Konan told her. Naruto informed me that all guard stations are to send reports via carrier bird every 6 hours. I'm going to have to speak with Naruto about revealing Konoha protocol to someone who isn't a Konoha ninja, Tsunade sighed. She then straightened in her chair and looked at Konan. I doubt this is anything to worry about. The team is probably just experiencing some difficulties and couldn't get a message out sooner. Our eastern border tends to have the most trouble because it's so close to Iwa and there are a lot more bandits and highwaymen in the area due to the tension between our two nations. Conan nodded, but didn't look convinced. She couldn't place her finger on it, but she did not think the delay was due to difficulties with bandits or anything of the sort. Still, I'll have a team sent to check in on them, Tsunade added after a moment's thought. In times such as these it certainly couldn't hurt to be cautious. Conan nodded, mildly reassured. With nothing serious left to talk about, Tsunade leaned forward and smiled amicably at the younger woman. So how are you liking Konoha? It's exactly as Jiraiya-sensei said it was, Conan told the older Kunoichi. Your village is very beautiful. To be honest, I'm rather jealous. I wish Megakure was as peaceful and beautiful as this village. You may end up getting your wish soon, you know? Tsunade told the woman. Naruto is doing everything he can to unite the shinobi nations through friendship and acts of goodwill. I know, Conan smiled at the mention of the man she had pledged herself to. His plans on uniting the elemental nations are much different than Pain's. It's why I decided to follow him. Several dozen miles from Konoha, hidden within a small hill and surrounded by shrubbery was a small outpost. It was one of many that littered Hai no Kuni. There were literally dozens of them, all interspersed throughout the nation. These outposts were built sometime after the Second Shinobi War on orders of the Sandaime Hokage, and all of them were dedicated towards keeping an eye on potential hostilities entering their nation. One of the Konoha shinobi, a chunin judging by the flak jacket, located at this particular outpost let out a grunt of pain as he was impaled by a hand. Crimson, life-giving liquid began pouring out of the wound, trickling onto the pale white hand that had been shoved right through his chest, flak jacket and all. The Konoha shinobi grit his teeth, blood leaking from his mouth as his arms shakily moved so he could grab onto the arm that had stabbed him. 1 second passed, then 2. The Konoha ninja's arms went slack, dropping limply to his sides. The man was no more. As the dead Konoha shinobi slumped over the arm, Zetsu finished absorbing what chakra the man had left. When he was finished he tossed the now useless corpse away, letting it hit the ground several feet from him with a dull thud. While Zetsu was looking at the now dead ninja, Kisame walked up to him, his giant blade hefted over his shoulder like always. That was boring, the shark-like man grumbled as he stopped a few feet from the plant man. He looked at Zetsu. I hope that Jinchuriki gives me a better fight than these wimps. Seriously, he had just taken on a full squad of Chunin and Junin, one that he had intercepted before they could arrive at this outpost, and they hadn't even been able to scratch him. Talk about a disappointment. Considering it's a Jinchuriki you're going to face, I bet she'll be much stronger than these ninja, Zetsu said. So you're going to be my distraction, huh? Kisame grunted. Where are the others? Oh, they're around. As Zetsu spoke, several figures emerged from the tree line. They were all Zetsu. To be more specific, they were clones of the original Zetsu. Unlike the original, these Zetsu's bodies were completely white and they had no Venus flytrap extension around their head. Also, unlike the original, these Zetsus had a strange zigzag pattern running down their stomach and another one on each leg that were reminiscent of the flytrap extension. More clones soon came out of the woodworks, some emerging from the trees, others coming up from the ground. There were hundreds of them, maybe even thousands. More than enough to keep Konoha's shinobi forces occupied. Of the Zetsu there, 8 walked over to the original and placed a hand on his shoulder. A bright, blue glow engulfed them as chakra was transferred from the original to the clones. When the transfer was finished, the 8 clones no longer looked like Zetsu but one of the 8 shinobi that had been located at this outpost and killed. The newly transformed Zetsus moved off, 4 going into the outpost while the other 4 took to the trees and headed for Konoha. Let's go, Zetsu said as he began walking in the direction of Konoha as well. Finally, Kisame muttered as he began moving again. I was starting to get bored standing around like this. As he walked forward, the Zetsu clones began dispersing one by one, some disappearing into the trees and others melding into the ground. Soon the grounds around the outpost looked just as they always did, with no sign of what happened other than a few blood splatters on the grass. Konoha wouldn't know what hit them. Chapter 28. The first sign anyone had that something was wrong was when several construction workers working on the edge of town went missing. They were supposed to have come back several hours ago, yet none of them had returned from the forest. A group of Chunin had been dispatched. The Chunin had returned with the workers in tow and everything went back to normal. No one had thought much of the incident. Then other people started disappearing. The first person to disappear was a shop worker. Her manager asked her to fetch something from the storage. She'd gone to do as asked but never returned. Several hours later, the manager had gone back to search for her, only to discover no trace of the woman. It was as if she had vanished from thin air. This was not a singular incident. Several people across Konoha vanished around the same time, one after the other. There was no sign of anything having happened to them, no clues that could lead anyone to determining where they disappeared to. In order to keep the rising panic from spreading, the Hokage dispatched shinobi to each scene. That was when the trouble truly started. Iruka had always been an average ninja. He'd never aspired to become a jonin. Thanks to the stains on his past, he believed that he could better serve Konoha by teaching future generations of troublemakers like Naruto Uzumaki and Konohamaru Sarutobi. What's more, the pride that he felt at seeing shinobi that he'd personally taught reach heights most ninja never achieved was indescribable. Despite not being a jonin, or even a special jonin, Iruka did possess an innate danger sense. Even before the disappearances started occurring, he could tell that something was wrong. School was off that day, and so Iruka was working in the missions department, where he handed off lower-grade missions to jonin with genin squads. He was actually the first shinobi to have discovered the missing persons problem when several concerned citizens came in claiming that so-and-so individual was missing. Iruka-sensei, a voice called out, causing Iruka to look up. "Ah, hello, Sakura," Iruka said to the bubblegum-haired girl as she walked into the room. "Did you need something? I was just checking in to see if there's been any progress with the missing persons cases," Sakura said. "The hospital has been placed on high alert since we don't know what's going on and want to be ready. Have you heard anything new?" "None, I'm afraid. Trouble." The doors to the mission room burst open and a young teenager stumbled in. He was holding a hand to his torso. Blood stained his fingers and expanded across his shirt. His heavy breathing and the sweat covering his pale skin showed how much effort he'd put into coming here. He looked ready to pass out. "Udon," Iruka said in shock. "Are you all right?" Udon nodded, though it looked like the action took a lot of effort. Sakura came over and helped him stand, slinging one of his arms around her shoulder, while putting her own arm around his torso. "I'm okay, but you have to help Konohamaru. He's being attacked by an unknown group of ninja." "What?" Iruka and Sakura shouted at the same time. Konoha was one of the most secure hidden villages. This was due to the barrier, which alerted them to any foreign chakra signatures that were not registered into the seal that controlled it. The system had been created and upgraded by Naruto Namikaze, and it had already alerted them to numerous spies trying to enter Konoha unnoticed. For someone to sneak through the barrier. "Sakura, take Udon to the hospital," Iruka ordered as he stood from his seat. "I'm going to alert the Hokage to what's happening." "Right." Iruka was pleased when Sakura didn't argue with him. After checking to make sure that he had all of his equipment, Iruka rushed out of the room and headed for the Hokage tower. "I need to hurry." Sakura was concerned. Udon was bleeding a lot more than a normal person should have. While she couldn't see the wound as she helped carry him, she could feel the blood soaking into her shirt. That meant that whatever had injured Udon must have cut one of his veins. Unfortunately, because of the delicate nature when it came to healing internal injuries like a severed vein, she couldn't perform more than basic first aid until they reached the hospital. "Hold on for just a little while longer, Udon," Sakura said. Udon nodded, though he could have also just been slipping in and out of consciousness. His head bobbed up and down as she half carried him into the hospital. As the doors closed behind her, she ignored the patients standing around and rushed further into the building. "I need a stretcher," Sakura ordered the nearest hospital staff member, a young woman who she'd worked with on occasion. The woman took one look at Udon, her eyes widened, and then she ran off. It didn't take long for a stretcher to arrive. Sakura laid Udon on it and had the woman her as she rushed through the hospital. Having already memorized the layout, staff numbers, and which hospital rooms were currently occupied, Sakura was able to not only find a room, but also purloin aid in helping her stabilize Udon. "Sorry, I need you to take off Udon's shirt and clean his wound." "Yes, ma'am." The young woman who helped her was not a medical ninja like herself, but she was very skilled in medicine, and she wasn't squeamish. Whenever Sakura had to deal with a particularly brutal case, she would get this woman to help on the off chance that Shizune couldn't. As the woman set about doing what she had asked, Sakura rushed over to the cabinet. While medical ninjutsu worked wonders for healing, there was no jutsu to disinfect wounds. When out on the field, disinfecting wounds normally had to be disregarded due to a lack of supplies. However, in the hospital, there was no need to be so stingy. A strangled gurgle that came from behind her caused Sakura to turn around. Surprise shot through her like a lightning jutsu as her mind tried to comprehend what she was seeing. Sari stumbled forward, her hands on her throat, which gushed blood from a slash wound. The wound was clearly fatal, and she would bleed out in seconds. She sent Sakura a pleading look before she fell face first onto the floor. Sakura would have rushed to help her, but at that moment, Udon leapt from the table, a bloody kunai in hand, and lunged at her. Sakura reacted. Moving to the left, she avoided the initial lunge. She then reared her fist back and slammed it into Udon's spinal column. For good measure, she pumped her chakra into his spine, disrupting his ability to move. As he fell to the ground like a puppet without a puppeteer, Sakura rushed over to Sari. Kneeling down, she turned the woman onto her back. Sari had already bled a lot. Her sightless eyes were staring at the ceiling. However, she was still alive, and that meant that Sakura could save her. She went through a set of hand seals, activating her healing jutsu. As her hands glowed an ethereal green, Sakura placed them over Sari's throat. There was no time to clean and disinfect this wound. If she didn't do something now, then the woman was going to die. Sweat poured from her brow as she concentrated, focusing all of her effort into healing the damage. The kunai had bitten into more than just Sari's throat. It had slit a vein in her neck and cut through her esophagus. Blood welled up in Sari's lungs, but Sakura worked quickly to heal the damage before the woman could suffocate on her own ichor. Next she healed the damaged veins. By the time she was done, not only was she exhausted, but Sari had turned a ghostly pale from having lost so much blood. Blood packs, Sakura murmured to herself as she rushed over to the cabinet for some blood packs. Udon tried to get up again, but she slammed her fist into his back. The ground underneath him dented as he was smashed into it. Grabbing a blood pack and an IV drip, Sakura went over to Sari and attached the IV to the blood pack, which she hung from a rack. After her task was finished, Sakura leaned back and wiped the sweat from her brow. There, she sighed, she should live. Now, to find out what's wrong with you, Don? Sakura stared at the person lying face first on the floor, a person who was most certainly not Udon. His skin was unnaturally white. Not just pale or even albino, but a chalky white that went beyond mere skin disease or lack of pigmentation. What's more, he had a lot of mutations. Half of his face was missing merely lumpy flesh. He had spiky knobs protruding from his shoulders, and his left arm and leg was twisted and barely looked like limbs at all. Regardless of how this guy looked, it was clear that this person was not Udon. This person's chakra signature is the exact same as Udon's, though. Does that mean? Sakura felt realization strike her like a heavy fist to the gut. If this person's chakra signature was the same as Udon's, then it meant that he had somehow mimicked Udon's signature, and if this person could mimic Udon's chakra signatures, then it stood to reason that he, and maybe his allies if he had any, could mimic other people's chakra signatures as well. This was not good. If there were people running around who could change their appearance and mimic chakra signatures, it meant that Konoha had been invaded without them even knowing it. Who knew how many enemies were running around, disguised as people that she and the others knew, that they trusted? She could already picture the massacre that would happen if she didn't do something. I need to inform Tsunade-sama about this. After calling on several ninja and ordering them to take not Udon to a secure location, Sakura rushed out of the hospital and towards the Hokage Tower. She hoped that she could make it before they incurred any more casualties. After Sakura informed Tsunade about how someone had been impersonating Udon, chakra signature and all, an alert went out to all shinobi. Yet even with the knowledge that there were people impersonating Konoha shinobi, there was little anyone could do to defend themselves. The impersonators were virtually indistinguishable from the original. Their appearance was the same, their chakra was the same, there was nothing different to help others identify who was and wasn't being impersonated. Many shinobi were killed within the first few minutes after being alerted to what was happening. Chaos reigned as, all across Konoha, shinobi were stabbed in the back by people they trusted, or rather, by the ninja impersonating people they trusted. Matters only became worse when, without warning, multiple shinobi had white deformities grow on their bodies. The deformities soon turned out to be from spores, which drained people of their chakra. Many shinobi were killed by all of their chakra being drained. Help! What are these things? I feel so weak. Someone? Aoba, a jonin of average ability, tried to help one of his comrades as spores grew on him. The frightened Chunin screamed as he tried to move to no avail. Whatever these things were, they not only drained a person of their chakra, but they also restricted their movement. Cutting it didn't work. Whatever this stuff was, it had hardened to the point where Kanai simply glanced off it. Aoba, sensei, the person he was trying to free gasped. Be behind, you? Turning around, Aoba barely had a second to raise his kunai in defense, as a creature with white skin attacked him. Clang! His arms were jarred and as an arm bared down on him. Twisting out of the way, he moved into the white creature's guard and stabbed it in the chest. No blood came out, but the creature did rear back as it was injured. Not wanting it to escape, he went through a set of hand seals, ending on the tiger seal. Kaden. Gokyaku no Jutsu. A massive ball of fire flew from his mouth. It hit the creature, which howled in pain as it was burnt alive. Flailing around, the creature eventually fell to the ground, writhing in tormented agony before it eventually ceased moving altogether. Aobo sighed and wiped the sweat from his forehead, feeling the way his arm shook from doing so. He didn't have much chakra, so B-rank jutsu like that exhausted him. Aoba-sensei, look out. The warning came too late. Fire lanced through his back like a spear. He could feel his spine being severed, hear the sickening squelch. As his spinal column was sheared, the last thing he saw before dying was several white creatures converging on his comrade. Fu didn't know what was going on. When the alert went out, Shino had told her to remain within the Aburame clan compound. He'd said that it would be safer there. While she wanted to go out and help, she also knew that doing so when no one knew what they were facing was dangerous. For all they knew, the person attacking Konoha could have been Akatsuki. So, Fu had stayed at the Aburame compound. There were several other people with her, guards, whose job was to protect her. The three shinobi protecting her were Muta, Shikoro, and Tatsuma. She didn't know much about them. Aburame were all stoic individuals, so they didn't talk much, and the only one she'd held extensive conversations with was Shino. Still, she was grateful for their presence. Fu didn't want to admit it, but with everything that had happened and was happening, she was worried. If you keep pacing like that, you'll burn a hole in the carpet, Shikoro said softly. He was reading a book, probably one about bug raising, which he periodically flipped the pages of. Sorry, she apologized. There is no need to apologize. I am merely stating that I'm worried about you. Thank you. The Aburame were a strange bunch. They were all so stoic, and they rarely ever spoke, and when they did speak, it was hard to tell if they were being serious or not. Fu didn't mind their generally emotionless attitudes. These people had taken her in. Still, it did make it hard to know what they were thinking. Sweden. Daibakusu Shoha. Neither Fu nor the Aburame clan members had a chance to do anything as several tons of water destroyed the wall and slammed into them. Fu screamed as she was swept up in a massive tide of rushing water. She was dragged underneath the water's surface. The world spun around her. Everything was passing by in a blur. She felt a sharp pain stab into her back, and she released a cry before she could stop herself. As all of the oxygen in her lungs was expelled, her body instinctively tried to breathe more oxygen in, which caused her to choke as water filled her lungs. She must have blacked out. The next thing Fu saw was a clear blue sky. She blinked several times, trying to figure out what had happened to her. Lying to her left, she saw Shikoro Aburame. His form was inert. Was he dead? Muta and Tatsuma were also there. They were lying not several feet away. They also weren't moving. A voice hummed. That wasn't as fun as I thought it would be. I was expecting them to put up more of a fight. Fu coughed several times, expelling water from her lungs. Nanabi's chakra helped her. She could feel it rolling within her, pushing the water out and evaporating what couldn't be pushed. With a gasp, her lungs were free, allowing her to take in several deep breaths. Move. Her eyes went wide as she rolled away from her current position not a moment too soon. Mere seconds after she moved, a large object crashed into the ground, shattering the earth. Fragments and rock shards flew everywhere. Fu scrambled to her feet, covering her body with her chakra-coated arms to protect her vitals. As the dust settled, Fu lowered her arms, and she was finally given her first look at the person who'd attacked her. He was a very tall shinobi. She couldn't see much of him because he was covered in a black cloak with red clouds, but he towered over her like a colossal giant. His blue skin gleamed with a strange slickness in the light. Eyes like a shark's stared at her with a predatory gleam. His clothing rustled as he grabbed the object, which she realized was a sword wrapped in bandages. He hefted the sword up with ease and set it on his shoulder. "So, you're the Namikaze who I'm here to take, eh? You don't look like much." Fu didn't know whether she should be insulted or not, but she knew that this person was trouble. Hiden. Rinpungakure no Jutsu. After going through a series of hand seals and taking a deep breath, Fu exhaled massive quantities of fine powder. The powder contained a luminescent quality. So bright was the powder that Kisame screamed in surprise as he was blinded, which allowed Fu to act. She quickly pulled on Nanabi's chakra. An intense aura engulfed her, bubbling over her skin, which became completely covered in blackish-red energy that took the shape of a bug. Mushikui. Fu charged at Kisame, who still appeared to be blinded. She was almost on her opponent when, without warning, Kisame stopped stumbling around like a blind man and slammed his sword into her face. Agony exploded as her nose broke with a loud crunch. With a shrill cry, Fu was sent flying backwards, pounding into the ground and rolling across it like a rag doll. Her transformation slipped as pain overrode her senses. Lying on her back, Fu struggled to sit up. "Hey, it's just like I thought. You might be a Jinchuriki, but you don't really know how to use all that power inside of you." Kisame grinned as he let his sword rest on his shoulder again. Fu glared at him, but he just chuckled. "And now it's time to, eh? What the hell are these bugs doing here?" Kisame's advance was halted when dozens, maybe even hundreds, of bugs crawled up his legs and latched onto him. He flailed around, swearing and cursing as he tried to fight them. It proved useless, and there was soon a legion of tiny insects crawling all over his skin. "What the fuck? These things are eating my chakra. Where did these damn things come from?" Kisame's flailing soon grew weaker and weaker until, finally, he collapsed onto the ground and remained still. Fu stared at the bug-covered lump, unable to believe what she had just witnessed. During this time, Shikoro, Muda, and Tatsuma all walked around from behind a line of trees. While their clothing was soaking wet, none of them appeared to have been injured. "Why, you're alive!" Fu exclaimed in shock and relief. Shikoro adjusted his glasses. "Of course we alive. An attack of that level wouldn't kill us. Are you alright, Fu?" Yes," Fu said. "I'm a little unsteady, but I'll be okay." "I am glad to hear that. Now, let's leave. This place is no longer safe." "I'm afraid I can't let you do that," a voice said from behind them. Before anyone could do anything, the body that had been covered in bugs exploded, sending water flying everywhere. Seconds later, a voice rang out all around them. "Sweden. Suikoden no Jutsu." A large shark burst into existence. Its watery skin revealed its origins as a powerful water jutsu. With a length that was several times longer than a human was tall and rows of sharp teeth, the creature looked like something straight out of a nightmare. Muto and Tatsuma leapt out of the way, but Shikoro, who'd been helping Fu stand, didn't have the time. He shoved Fu away from him, thereby sealing his fate. Fu watched, horrified, as the gigantic jaws of the shark clamped down on the Aburame shinobi. She could practically hear the sound of his bones being crushed over his screams of pain. Not long after that, the shark finished biting straight through him, sending the two halves violently careening away from each other. While Fu screamed at the sight, Muto and Tatsuma attacked Kisame without hesitation. Bugs burst from their cloaks, whole swarms of them, which rushed to devour their shark-like foe. Kisame grinned. Sweden no Jutsu." The bugs stood no chance. As water shot from Kisame's mouth in a powerful torrent, the bugs were blasted away, and because they'd been doused with water, their wings had grown too heavy to keep them uplifted. All of them fell to the ground and remained there. "Not yet, Sweden. Bakusu Shoha." After needing more chakra in his stomach, Kisame spat out a great volume of water, which surged and swelled like a massive tidal wave. The shark-like man rode atop the wave. He was grinning. Fu could do nothing as the water loomed over her. In the face of such an overwhelming technique, her mind had gone blank. She didn't know how to deal with this. She didn't know how to defeat a monster like this. Unlike her, Muto and Tatsuma did not seem as hesitate. They responded quickly. Tatsuma grabbed Fu and lifted her over his shoulder. He and Muto then leapt above the water as it crashed into the ground, engulfing everything in foamy white tides. Sweden. Gashokuzane. Kisame placed his hands on the water, and from his fingers, 5 sharks emerged. As Muto and Tatsuma landed on the water, the sharks burst from its surface and attacked. While Tatsuma moved out of the way, Muto did not. He unleashed a swarm of bugs to attack the sharks, making them feast off the chakra that kept the shark's body together. Unfortunately, he didn't have enough bugs to catch all the sharks. One of them clamped onto his leg and pulled him under. No! Fu screamed as Tatsuma retreated with her still over his shoulder. Man! What the hell are these things? Kiba shouted as several white creatures tried to attack them. He leapt back, then drilled several with a gatsuga, causing them to fly everywhere. Does it matter? Shino asked rhetorically as he spread his arms. A horde of bugs blasted out from his sleeves, engulfing several of the creatures and draining them of their chakra. The white monsters went down, twitching and spasming until they laid still. Don't answer my question with another question. Let's go, Akamaru. Arf. Just like the others, Team 8 was fighting against uncertainty and the new white creatures, of which they knew nothing about. However, they were a bit better off than a lot of others. While Hinata's Byakugan could not distinguish chakra signatures, she could tell them what was happening in a 360-degree view around them, thereby warning them of possible approaching danger. Thanks to that, they'd been able to root out several enemy shinobi that had been disguised as Konoha shinobi. Gatsuga. Leaping into the air, Kiba and Akamaru spun around like a pair of drills. They slammed into the white horde, decimating their ranks, sending bodies flying left and right as they were torn apart. However, no matter how many enemies they destroyed, more filled the ranks. Man, how many of these guys are there? What are these things anyway? Demented clones? Hinata, who'd been using her Byakugan to the best of her abilities, shoved her left foot off the ground to spin around in a circle. Chakra emitted from her body at various points. The chakra eventually formed a dome of pure energy, which several members of the White Horde slammed into. The white creatures were flung away. Some of them struck walls while others simply tumbled down the road. Hinata stopped spinning, dust filling the air around them. I do not know, she answered, her breathing heavy. However, all of these people have the same chakra, so I think they might be clones. No two people can have the same chakra, Shino added as his bugs returned after consuming all the chakra of his enemies. Then why do some of these guys have the same chakra signatures as our shinobi? Kiba demanded to know. Were you not listening? Shina inquired rhetorically. These people are mimicking the chakra signatures of our shinobi. It is likely a talent unique to whoever these copies belongs to. Damn bastards, Kiba scowled. Don't think I'm gonna let you people get off lightly for this. You hear me? As Kiba launched himself into the mass swelling of enemies, Shino sighed. Idiot, he mumbled before backing up his comrade. Deep within Konoha's underground prison, Sasuke sat against the wall. His knees were drawn up to his chest. He ignored the darkness, the coldness, and everything else. With his revenge complete, Sasuke had nothing left. He was an empty shell without a purpose. Movement caught his attention. He looked up as a figure appeared within a black portal. It was a man with a strange spiral mask, and he wore the same cloak that Itachi had worn, black with red clouds. Sasuke Uchiha, he said, and Sasuke felt like he was being dissected as a single red eye stared at him through the mask hole. You're not at all what I expected. It is hard to believe that someone like you could have beaten Itachi. Sasuke said nothing. He didn't care what this person thought. The figure chuckled. Not much of a talker, I see. That is fine. I don't need you to talk, only listen. And the man began to talk. He spoke of Itachi and the third Hokage. He spoke of sacrifice. He spoke of things that made Sasuke pay attention. As Sasuke listened, rage boiled within his heart. What will you do, Sasuke Uchiha? The man who called himself Madara asked. Sasuke closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his eyes gleamed with purpose and a desire for vengeance. On that day, Sasuke made a choice, one that would affect more than just him. While Konoha mounted a defense against the strange creatures, Konan went straight to the Hokage's office. She'd seen the enemy that the Konoha shinobi were battling. While she'd never realized that the two sides were capable of splitting apart, she knew who this person was even if he was missing half of himself. "Hokage-sama," she said as she rushed into the door without ceremony. Several people were already in the room. Konan did not recognize all of them, but she knew at least three. Kakashi Hitaki, Sakura Haruno, and Shizune also stood within the room. There appeared to be a meeting of some kind, which she had just barged into. "Konan," Tsunade grunted as everyone stopped talking and turned to her. "I'm sorry for sounding brusque, but if there's something you need, then please wait. We're in the middle of a crisis right now." "I know. That's why I'm here." Knowing that time was of the essence, Konan walked into the room and got straight to the point. "I know who's attacking you. He's a member of Akatsuki, a creature known as Zetsu." "So, the white creature attacking us is called Zetsu," Kakashi said. While his Sharingan eye was covered, his visible eye was sharper than a raikiri. "I thought he was supposed to be a man who looked almost like a plant." "He is supposed to, but it seems like his white half and black half somehow became split. I did not know that was possible, but there is no mistaking that the creatures you've been fighting are Zetsus." "Can you tell us anything about him?" asked Tsunade. "I can tell you know what I know, but I don't know how much help it will be," Konan admitted. "Zetsu is a strange creature. He should have a light and dark side, physically speaking, I mean. One side of him is supposed to black while the other is white. I saw a few of those Zetsus on the way here. It looks like someone took Zetsu and ripped the black side off. He also seems to have several abilities that I was not aware of, and the Venus flytrap that Kakashi mentioned surrounding him is mysteriously missing." Tsunade's scowl deepened. "Well, that's just great. So we're dealing with a mostly unknown entity. Do you have any information that could prove useful?" Konan knew that Tsunade was not angry at her. She understood that, but the tone in the Hokage's voice, the harsh quality it possessed, still made her flinch. "I can tell you that Zetsu has always worked with Tobi, one of Akatsuki's members." She frowned. "Tobi is merely an alias, however. The one who goes by that name is actually Madara Uchiha." Her words sent everyone who'd been present into shock. A hushed silence fell over the crowd. It was like a ripple. Konan could practically feel the fear rolling off them. "Madara is dead," Tsunade said with finality. "He has to be. My grandfather killed him." Konan shook her head. "I do not know what to tell you. I don't know if the first Hokage simply thought he'd killed Madara, or if the person calling himself Madara is an imposter. I only know what I've been told. Tobi calls himself Madara, and he is undeniably skilled. He also has the Sharingan. I can attest to that," Kakashi added. "When we confronted him in the forest, I saw his Sharingan." Tsunade cut into the frightened whispering that broke out. "Let us go under the assumption that he is Madara Uchiha. Do you think he is here?" "Hard to say," Konan admitted. "He does not like to fight unless he has to. If anything, I would say that we should worry more about what Zetsu's goal is for attacking." "His goal?" Sakura asked. "Zetsu has never been a fighter," Konan explained. "His talent has always lay in spying. Even if he has strange abilities that I haven't seen until now, he's still weak. An attack of this level will not defeat Konoha, which means there is another reason for him to attack." Everyone fell silent. Konan also grew introspective as she tried to deduce the Zetsu's real purpose for being there. Truthfully, there didn't seem to be much reason for him to be there. Yes, he was currently sowing chaos, but now that everyone knew what to look out for, defeating him would be a simple enough matter. So, why would he do something like this? Attack when there was no purpose, create panic when there was no reason, unless his reason is to cause a distraction. "Hokage-sama, where is Fu?" Konan asked. "Fu?" Tsunade frowned. "She should be on the Aburame clan grounds." Her eyes widened as she began barking orders. "Kakashi, Sakura, head over to the Aburame clan grounds and locate Fu." "Yes, Tsunade-sama," the two said at once. "I'll go with you too," Konan said, only for Tsunade to disagree. "Actually, I would like you here. I need you to help coordinate our defenses, since you know the members of Akatsuki the best." "With all due respect, Hokage-sama, there is little that I can do to help. Zetsu has apparently been hiding several abilities of which I know nothing about. However, even if my knowledge of Zetsu is no longer reliable, my knowledge of whoever is working while Zetsu distracts us will be. There was truthfully only one person who could have been attacking at this point. Kisame. Everybody else was dead, having been killed by Naruto. Tsunade debated with herself for a moment, then sighed reluctantly and nodded. Very well. Go and help Kakashi and Sakura. If the person going after Fu is who I think it is, they will need help anyway. I'm at your disposal, Hokage-sama. Good. Tsunade clapped her hands. All right, people, let's do this. Fu and Tatsuma stopped running after they reached a thickly forested area. Trees covered almost every square meter, and shrubs ran along underfoot. They were likely in one of the outlier training grounds that surrounded Konoha's circumference. Sinking to the ground, Fu felt her entire body shaking in exhaustion, fear, and guilt. I'm sorry, she whispered. Tatsuma, who'd been standing near a tree and releasing a steady stream of bugs, turned to her. Sorry for what? For what happened? Muto and Shikoro died because of me. Bringing her legs up to her chest, Fu wrapped her arms around them and tried to ignore the way her body shook. This is all my fault. If I had never come to Konoha, this wouldn't have happened. Tatsuma's glasses glinted in the low light that broke through the canopy. He tilted his head, as if considering her words, then he turned back to the tree and continued releasing bugs. We Aburame run on logic, he said after a time. An Aburame will never act on their emotions. The hive mind of our insects do not allow us. Perhaps, more than any other shinobi in Konoha, we understand what it means to be a small part of a greater whole. And just like we understand that, we also understand that things happen in war. Things we don't expect, things we don't want. People die. Loved ones are lost. As an Aburame, we know this, and we accept this, which is why I can honestly tell you that what happened here is not your fault. Fu looked up in shock. But, if I had never come to Konoha, then Konoha would have eventually been attacked anyway, Tatsuma said. If not because of Naruto Namikaze, then because we would have opposed the people calling themselves Akatsuki anyway. This was bound to happen sooner or later. It was just bad fortune that it happened while you were here. Fu didn't know if Tatsuma was trying to make her feel better, or if those were his real thoughts. Because his face was completely covered, and what parts of his face could be seen revealed nothing, she never knew what he was thinking. However, she was grateful for his words. Ah, ain't this a touching moment? A mocking voice rang out around them. Fu stiffened while Tatsuma directed his bugs toward an area near their position. The bugs swarmed over there, but they were destroyed by several large water bullets slamming into them. A large object, a sword, suddenly shot out from behind a large bush. Left with little time to prepare, all Tatsuma could do was create a wall of bugs. It did little good. The sword smashed apart the bugs and slammed into Tatsuma, who cried out in agony as the bandages tore and spikes suddenly jutted from the weapon. As blood ran down his body, the sword seemed to pure. G. Tatsume tried to pull the sword off, but the moment he touched the handle, spikes erupted from it, impaling his hands. Tatsuma screamed as the protrusions went through his palms and out of the back of his hands. The purring also grew louder, then, without warning, the sword wrapped around Tatsuma, and a large mouth appeared at its point. Fu could do nothing but sit there, terrified as the sword chomped down on Tatsuma's head, then slowly ate the rest of his body. She quaked as blood splattered the ground. Her breathing became so harsh she might have been hyperventilating. The sword, engorged from having eaten somebody, purred in a satisfactory manner and released what sounded like a burp. Chuckling, Kisame knelt down and lifted his sword by the handle. How was that, Samahata? Was it good eating? Good. I'm glad you're satisfied. Standing up to his full, intimidating height, Kisame grinned at Fu. I guess it's now time to deal with the squirt. I think I should chop her legs off so she can't run away anymore. Before Kisame could get any closer to Fu, several hundred shuriken made of paper sliced through the thick foliage. Kisame brought up Samahata, blocking his vitals with the large sword. Several shuriken still penetrated his flesh, hitting his thighs, arms, and stomach. Blood ran from the wounds, but Kisame seemed unbothered. Well, now, Kisame started with a grin as several people landed in the clearing. I never expected to see you again, Konan. Standing protectively before Fu was Konan, Kakashi, and Sakura. Naruto wiped the sweat from his brow as he looked at the afternoon sun. It was midday. The sun overhead was bearing down on him and the others as they worked. All around him, Konoha and Yuki Ninja searched for survivors. They hadn't found many, which was expected considering the amount of damage that had been done to this place, but they had found a few survivors. Naruto. Yugito's voice alerted him to her presence. They'd split up a while ago to cover more ground. While Naruto was worried about her, Koyuki was staying by the woman's side in case she had a relapse. Turning to her, Naruto saw that she looked surprisingly happy for some reason. There couldn't have been many reasons, and he quickly deduced that they'd found another survivor. Running alongside her, trying to keep pace with the more athletic woman, was Koyuki. The queen looked close to collapse. On any other occasion, Naruto would have chuckled. "Yugito," he said as the woman in question rushed up and grabbed him by the arm. "Naruto, we found a survivor. It's Samui." Remembering the young woman with the abnormally large bust, Naruto allowed Yugito to pull him along with her. They traveled over debris, walked around massive structures that had collapsed, and raced over once towering pillars that had been destroyed by the Rinnegan's power, eventually reaching an outlying section of the village. There wasn't as much destruction this far out. The Rinnegan attack that destroyed Kumo had been localized to a single point. However, there were several buildings that had been decimated, gutted, and ruined. Among the pile of debris, Yugito dragged him to where Samui was being helped by several medical ninja. Her skin was marred with cuts and bruises, and Naruto could see blood leaking from her mouth, leading him to believe that she had internal bleeding. As the medical ninja cut off her shirt and checked for broken bones or ruptured organs, Naruto noticed the slow rise and fall of her chest. "Samui," Yugito said as she knelt beside the woman. The medical ninja ignored her presence and continued working. "Samui, it's me. It's Yugito." Samui didn't respond. Naruto looked at Koyuki, who noticed him and turned her head, gracing him with a sad smile. Naruto wrapped an arm around Yugito, pulling her close for comfort. She didn't resist him. Her body shuddered against his, causing him to lean forward and kiss her forehead. "Don't worry, Yugito. Samui will be fine once she gets medical attention." "I know." Yugito turned in his arm and buried her head in his face. "Thank you." Naruto didn't know why she was thanking him. He'd done nothing to be thanked for. "You're welcome," he said anyway. Sometimes, simply being there was enough to earn someone's thanks. Sweden. Suikoden no Jutsu. Sweden. Suikoden no Jutsu. Two large sharks burst into existence, their identically watery forms clashing together and blasting liquid everywhere in a misty spray. Konan, who stood several feet as Kakashi and Kisame clashed, casually blinked at the incredible display of prowess that the copy ninja was wielding. "I know of the Sharingan from Itachi, but this is my first time seeing it being used up close. It truly is a fearsome dojutsu." "Hey, you wield the Sharingan well for someone who isn't an Uchiha," Kisame complimented as he grabbed Samahata by the hilt and swung it forward. "Thank you." Kakashi leapt backwards, avoiding the attack. He threw several shuriken which went wide of Kisame, who kept rushing in until Kakashi yanked on the wires in his hands and entangled the missing Kiri ninja. Coming from someone who was partnered with Itachi, that is a high compliment. Chidori. Lightning traveled along the wires, sparking and crackling. Kisame grunted, his muscles straining as he broke free of the wires and leapt back. Grinning widely, he placed Samahata on his back and went through even more hand seals. Sweden. Daikoden no Jutsu. Streamers of water gathered swiftly and formed a massive shark that was nearly 10 times bigger than his previous one. Thrusting his hands forward, Kisame sent the shark at Kakashi, who'd already completed his own hand seals and flawlessly performed the same jutsu, thereby negating the attack. Seeing her chance, Konan launched several paper shuriken at Kisame, who saw them coming and dispatched them with Samahata. However, those shuriken were not normal, and the moment they met his sword, all of them exploded in a spectacular manner. Kisame burst out of the explosion, his skin blackened but not truly burnt. He was wearing a maniacal grin as he raced toward her. "I had almost forgotten about you, Konan." He tried to slash her apart with Samahata, but Konan had already taken to the sky. Wings made of paper carried her forward. The wind whistled in her ear and rustled her hair. Before traveling too high, she threw several paper bombs at Kisame, who leapt back as they exploded, blasting apart the ground. Reikuri. the sound of loud chirping preceded Kakashi's appearance. Lightning covered his hand as he darted forward, stepping Kisami's guard and plunging his lightning-coated fist into the shark man's chest only for Kisame to burst into water, and for that water to entrap Kakashi within a dome. Kakashi then burst into smoke and a log took his place, revealing that he'd used the replacement technique, Karuimi. "Hee, this is pretty fun," Kisame said as he and Kakashi reappeared several meters away from each other. He went through a string of hand seals. "Let's make this even more fun." Sweden. Dai Bakusu Shoha. Water spewed from Kisami's mouth in vast quantities. The water rose over everything, crushing waves looming over the forest of Konoha like towering mountains. Konan knew of this technique, and she knew that Kakashi wouldn't be able to escape from something with this sort of area-wide effect. Swooping down, she flew right at Kakashi and grabbed him just as the waves threatened to crush him. Whoom! The waves slammed into the ground. Several trees were crushed underneath the water, splintering into thousands of pieces before being swept away by the tide. "Thanks for the assist," Kakashi said. "You're welcome." Down below, Kisame, who was now standing on the crushing waves, wove more hand seals. Knowing that whatever he had planned couldn't be good, Konan rushed to ascend even higher. If she could just move out of the range of his techniques, Suiro Samiodori no Jutsu. Oh, no. Konan felt panic as a dome of water engulfed her and Kakashi. The massive dome expanded quickly. She felt herself becoming trapped within the dome. Not only could she no longer breathe, but because her wings were made of paper, they quickly became soggy and broke apart. What do I do now? This was not a good situation. All of her jutsu were paper-based, but paper was useless unless prepared in advance like the technique that had gotten Madara. This technique, which was controlled by Kisame, made her helpless. Kakashi tapped on her shoulder, garnering her attention and pointing at something. Konan looked at where he'd pointed and felt her worry increase. Kisame was rushing toward them, and his appearance was very different from what she remembered. His blue skin had picked up a grayish pallor. Large fins covered the back of his arms, and his hands were webbed and clawed. Gills ran along his trapezius. His head was no longer shaped like a human's, but was long and sleek, almost like a real shark. A long tail jutted from his tailbone. Samahata was nowhere to be found. "He's fused with Samahata. This isn't good. He has us at a complete disadvantage." Kisame closed the distance. She and Kakashi swam out of the way, but his tail slammed into Kakashi, who he must have deemed was a larger threat. Fortunately, Kakashi still seemed capable of using jutsu. He replaced himself with another log. Staring at her current companion, she pointed at Kakashi, then at the other side of the water prison. Kakashi must have understood what she wanted. He nodded, and they split up and traveled in opposite directions. After a moment's hesitation, Kisame chased after Kakashi. The water prison technique that Kisame was using had one glaring weakness. Once the technique had been activated, it altered its position in order to reflect the direction of its user's movements, in this case, Kisame. While this was great for one-on-one battles, it was not so great when there were two or more opponents. Kisame could only follow one person, which meant that if she and Kakashi split up, it would be easier for one of them to escape. After that, they could break the technique from the outside. Konan's lungs burned as she swam towards the edge of the technique. She'd already been inside of that water prison for what must have been 60 seconds, and she was running out of oxygen. Her vision was becoming blurry, her arms felt like they were weighed down by lead, and her legs were growing tired. Just a little bit further. With a startled gasp, Konan burst out of the water prison. She landed on the ground, bending her knees absorbed the impact. Stand up, she turned around to see the water dome. It truly was a massive thing. She didn't know how large it was, but judging from her observation, she'd say that it was around 1 kilometer in circumference at least. "How do I destroy a technique like that?" "Konan-san," Sakura called out to her. Konan turned around to see the pink-haired girl leaping down from a tree. "Sakura, where is Fu?" "She's with Tsunade-sama and Shizune-san," Sakura said, huffing. "What is that technique? And where is Kakashi?" "Kakashi-san is currently fighting Kisame inside of that technique." Konan turned back to the dome of water. "We need to find some way to destroy this dome, however, I lack the power necessary for such an endeavor." She might have been able to destroy the technique if she used a bunch of paper bombs, but there was no guarantee that would work. While bombs created incredible force, especially when used in conjunction with several hundred other bombs, the water was being held together by Kisami's chakra. What's more, setting up enough paper bombs to demolish that technique would take time. They didn't have that much time. So, you need to destroy that water prison somehow, Sakura murmured, her expression thoughtful. Do you think you can fly me over the dome? Konan didn't know if she could. Would her paper work, or was it too wet? Turning her head, she channeled her chakra and formed a pair of paper wings on her back. Flapping them experimentally produced decent results. Her wings were wet, but they appeared to be in working order. I should be able to, she announced, grabbing hold of Sakura and taking off into the air. Her wings felt heavy, and Sakura's added weight didn't help any. Konan channeled more chakra into her wings, hardening them further, allowing her to ascend higher. It wasn't long before they were hovering over the large dome of water. Konan could see Kakashi battling with Kisame. Thus far, the copy ninja managed to remain alive via judicial use of his Sharingan, but he had to be running out of breath. She could see that his movements were getting sluggish. What do I do now? Konan asked Sakura. Drop me. What? I said drop me. Let go and I'll take care of the rest. Konan didn't know what Sakura had in mind. She must have been crazy for thinking up a plan like this. However, it wasn't like they had any other plans. Konan let go of Sakura, who plummeted toward the sphere of water like a rock. The pink-haired girl reared back her fist. Was she actually planning on punching this thing? Shanuru. She was, apparently. Konan could only blink as Sakura yelled out a strange battle cry and slammed her fist into the dome of water. She expected the young woman to simply sink into the water. What happened next shocked her. Starting from the point of impact and spreading across the entire prison was a large ripple. The dome soon began to undulate. Then, without warning, the entire thing exploded. Water flew everywhere. Konan closed her eyes as she was struck in the face with enough water to drown a dragon. Her wings, thoroughly soaked, were unable to remain cohesive and broke apart. As she fell, she channeled chakra to her legs and feet, softening the fall so that she didn't break her legs. Looking around, she saw Sakura standing on the ground, her fist still extended in the punch position. Kisame and Kakashi were also there. The Akatsuki ninja looked utterly flabbergasted to see his technique destroyed, and his shark-like face had morphed into an expression of astonishment. On the other hand, Kakashi looked quite proud. That was a good punch, Sakura, he complimented. Thank you. Kakashi-sensei, Sakura said with a tired sigh. She destroyed one of Kisami's most powerful techniques with a single punch, Konan thought in shock. Truly, the younger generation of shinobi were quite fearsome. Hey, I didn't expect that, Kisame muttered. You're pretty strong, little missy. I didn't think you were packing that much power. I've been trained by Tsunade-sama herself. Sakura wheezed. She must have used up most of her chakra. Don't underestimate me, duly noted. Konan, Kakashi, and Sakura surrounded Kisame, who didn't seem bothered at all. In fact, he wore a rather wide grin, which made his current shark-like appearance all the more frightening. Despite this, Konan was confident that they could beat him. His best technique had just been destroyed, and it was now 3 against 1. Even for someone with Kisami's monstrous reserves, this would be a hard-fought battle. Kisame, a voice said as a black creature appeared out of the ground. Zetsu? Konan was startled to see Zetsu without his white half, but if the white half had, indeed, split as it appeared, then it made sense that the black half was on its own too. What do you want, Zetsu? Can't you see I'm busy? I can see that, however, there's no more need to fight anymore. We've already accomplished our objective. TCH, so we're leaving already, are we? Kisame looked annoyed but resigned. Well, fine. I've had a good deal of fun, so I guess we can head out. You say that like we're just going to let you leave, Kakashi said. However, it wasn't the Kakashi in front of Kisame, but the one directly behind him. Reikuri. Kakashi plunged his lightning-covered hand into Kisami's back, but rather than blood coming out of the wound, it was water. The Kisame that he'd killed dispersed into a puddle, which Konan deduced came from the remains of the water prison. Don't worry, copy ninja. We'll finish this battle later, Kisami's voice echoed all around them. I hope you're looking forward to it as much as I am. Silence reigned in the clearing for a moment. Then Kakashi sighed, breaking the silence as he placed his headband back over his Sharingan eye. It looks like this battle ended in a draw, he said. Conan got the feeling that Kakashi had been hoping to eliminate Kisame, not that she couldn't understand why. What should we do now? Asked Sakura. We'll go back to Konoha and help them drive off the white Zetsus. They began to move. Because Kakashi had used up a lot of chakra, they didn't travel as quickly as they could have. The drain on his reserves must have been phenomenal. The white Zetsus have probably all retreated by now, Conan said. Zetsu told Kisame that they had completed their objective. I wonder what he meant by that. Sakura asked. Neither Conan nor Kakashi answered her. They wanted to know the same thing. When Conan, Kakashi, and Sakura returned from battling Kisame, it was to discover that the battle had already reached its conclusion. What was going on now was simply cleanup. The battle hadn't caused much collateral damage. Most of the buildings were still completely intact, some were even pristine. What the Konoha shinobi needed to do was not help with repairs, but locate the dead bodies of the ninja and civilians who'd been impersonated by the white Zetsus. Unfortunately, there were a lot of them. Conan stood in the Hokage's office with Tsunade and several others. She decided to lend aid by offering the Hokage whatever expertise she could. It wasn't much. Zetsu apparently had more powers and abilities than either she or Nagato had been aware of, which meant that Akatsuki was even more divided than she had assumed. It was becoming clear to her now that she and Nagato had merely been tools for Madara. Though she didn't know what his ultimate purpose was, she understood that it likely wasn't the goal that Nagato was aiming for. This situation has become even harder to grasp. Several people came into the office, ninja who'd been helping with the cleanup. Conan didn't recognize them, but that wasn't surprising. Status, Tsunade said while keeping her fingers laced in front of her, as if to try and shield herself from more bad news. We've located the bodies of more than 2,000 civilians and 1,500 shinobi, though the numbers appear to be rising. Considering there were a total of 5,000 civilians who went missing, chances are good that we're going to have more than 8,000 casualties. I see. Conan wondered if the pained look that Tsunade wore was being mirrored on her own face. What happened was horrible, and there was very little they could do to recover right now, especially after the Kumogakure incident. She wondered, almost absently, if this disaster would have happened if Naruto had been present. I don't think there was much that even he could have done. Naruto was an excellent fighter, but he didn't have any sensor capabilities. Although his Sage mode might have been able to distinguish chakra signatures, but not having any sensing abilities of her own, she wasn't sure if even that would have worked. Please keep me informed of how the search is going, Tsunade said after several long moments of silence. Yes, Hokage-sama. As the man left the room, Tsunade slammed her fist on the table. Damn it, that Akatsuki really played us for fools this time. Conan felt guilt hit her like an earth jutsu to the gut. She had once been a member of Akatsuki. I'm sorry, she apologized. Tsunade grunted as she went about arranging her desk. It's not your fault. This kind of situation would have surprised anyone, she said, though Conan felt like Tsunade was, indeed, blaming her for what happened. It might have just been her own guilty conscience playing tricks on her, but she could have sworn that Tsunade's voice was incriminating her, as if to say, it really is your fault. You should have been more proactive. If there is anything that I can do to help, don't worry, I'll be sure to let you know. Right now, though, all we're doing is counting the number of casualties. Conan said nothing. Fingering the kunai in her pocket, she wished more than ever that Naruto had never left for that mission to Kumo. Even if what happened here was inevitable, she would have felt better if he'd been with her. Hokage-sama, a Konoha ninja rushed through the door, gasping for breath. He looked like he'd run across the entirety of Konoha to get here. What's the problem now? Tsunade asked with a scowl. It's Sasuke Uchiha, ma'am, the shinobi gasped. He's missing from his cell. Altogether, they had found 2,365 survivors. Considering Kumogakure had once boasted a population of about 100,000, 2,365 wasn't that large. But when Naruto took the amount of destruction into consideration, they were probably lucky to find even that many. Kumo hadn't just been destroyed. It had been annihilated. The very mountain range that it had been built on was gone. The fact that there were any survivors at all was a miracle. They'd been forced to dig deep underneath the mountain range's rubble to locate anyone. Naruto had made liberal use of his shadow clones to help in this task. While some survivors had been near the surface and easily found, there were just as many who'd been buried underneath tons of rocks and dirt. The mountain had collapsed in such a way that it had created pockets of space where the people hadn't been crushed. Under his direction, Konoha had built a temporary base stationed just outside of the village. They'd built several tents for the citizens to sleep in. There were also medical tents for the medical ninja, who'd been working all day tending to the injured. Naruto felt almost out of place. He wanted to do more for the people here, but there wasn't anything else that he could do. He was no medical ninja. Just about the only thing he was good for during times like these was manual labor. Walking among the tents, Naruto continued moving to the back, until he reached a specific tent. He pushed the flap aside and entered. Like all of the tents, this one was bare. It contained only a small cot resting on one side of the room. There were 3 people inside already: Yugito, Koyuki, and Samui. Of the 3, only 2 were conscious. "How's Samui doing?" Naruto asked as he walked up to them. "She's still unconscious," Yugito said softly, not looking up from the other blonde. Naruto realized that she was running her hands through Samui's hair. "Though I've been told that she'll wake up soon." "That's good." Naruto looked at Koyuki, who caught his eye and shook her head. He sighed, walked up to Yugito, and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Are you feeling guilty for what happened here?" Yugito didn't answer at first, and he didn't rush her. He let her take time to formulate an answer, knowing that her feelings right now must have been contradictory and mixed with self-loathing. "I know, in my head, that I couldn't have done anything even if I had been here," she said at last. "I understand that, but at the same time, your heart is telling you that you should have been here and done something," Naruto finished when Yugito trailed off. She didn't say anything, but her silence was more telling than any words she could have said. Sitting down next to her, he placed a hand over her free hand. He didn't say anything. There wasn't anything that he could say to make her feel better. He could have told her that it wasn't her fault, that she couldn't have done anything, but that wouldn't have changed how she felt. Yugito knew that she wasn't responsible. However, sometimes just because someone knew that in their head, that didn't mean the guilt, the feeling of being responsible, would go away. Ending. A groan caused all 3 of them to turn their heads. Samui stirred. Slowly, her eyes fluttered open, revealing cloudy blue irises. She blinked several more times. The woman looked around, her head tilting slightly, as if she was scanning her surroundings, before they landed on Yugito. "Yugito? Samui," Yugito whispered, her voice filled with emotion. Tears stung her eyes. "I'm so glad, you're all right. I was, when I found out what happened to Kumo, Kumo?" Samui whispered. What happened to Kumo?" Yugito opened her mouth, then closed it just as quickly. She tried again, only to get the same results. Samui, fortunately, seemed to realize what she was trying to say. "I should have known this would happen. The Raikage, is he still alive?" Yugito said nothing. "I see." Samui closed her eyes for a moment, her face etched into an expression that made Naruto uncomfortable. It felt like he was getting a glimpse of something that she shouldn't have seen. Naruto could sense that Samui was on the verge of losing it. Yugito also appeared to be withholding her tears. He looked over at Koyuki, silently seeking her advice. She tilted her head toward the door, then gestured to themselves. Naruto took the hint. "Yugito," he said, leaning over to speak softly into her ear. "Yuki and I are going outside to check on how the other survivors are doing. Are you two gonna be okay alone?" Yugito turned her head. She gave him a watery smile before leaning over to kiss him on the cheek. "We'll be fine, thank you." Gracing her with one last smile that he hoped was reassuring, Naruto took Koyuki by the hand and led her outside. Several seconds after the flap closed behind him, the sound of despairing twin wails echoed from the other side. He placed a silencing seal over the tent. Whatever happened in there was no one's business but Yugito's and Samui's. Neither of them spoke for a long while. They walked through the series of tents, watching as Konoha and Yuki Ninja traversed the small area, doing whatever they could to lighten the Kumo survivors' load. Several saluted or bowed to them as they passed. A line of people could be seen several meters away, the refugees of Kumo that were conscious. Even though they were carrying plates of food, courtesy of Koyuki's chefs, their expressions remained despondent. "What are we going to do about all of these displaced people?" Koyuki asked Naruto. He was grateful for the chance to speak. "I'm not sure yet," Naruto admitted. "We certainly can't do nothing, which means we'll need to see if there are any nations willing to take them in. I wouldn't mind letting them come to Konoha, but I'll need to clear that with the Hokage, especially since there are so many people. If it was just 1, 2, or even 100, there wouldn't have been a problem with relocating them to Konoha. However, with 2,365 survivors, that was too many to consider relocating without deciding on other factors that would come with such a large population increase. There would, first and foremost, be the issue of housing. With so many refugees, they'd need to find a place for all of them to stay. This was on top of things like provisions and several other issues, not the least of which was having all of them undergo a psychoanalysis to see anyone might be suffering from PTSD or other mental illnesses due to trauma and stress. There was a lot more to consider than simply, should we, or shouldn't we? The land of snow will be able to take some of the refugees, Koyuki said. Now that we have the heat generators, we're not short on supplies. We've recently even advanced in the study of agriculture and have a surplus of food, particularly rice. I'll talk it over with my advisors to see how many we can take without putting a strain on our resources. And I'll see about asking Tsunade-sama if we can allow to rest to take up residence Konoha, Naruto said. They stopped several meters outside of the encampment. He turned to Koyuki and slid his arms around her waist, pulling her close. In return, she placed her arms around his neck. Holding her like this, Naruto enjoyed the way she felt in his arms. His only regret was that she was wearing so many clothes that he couldn't feel the light curvature of her waist. "Thank you for doing this," he said, presenting her with a soft smile. Koyuki shook her head. "You know that I'm more than happy to help. What happened here is a tragedy, but it would be even more tragic if those of us in positions to help did nothing." Spoken like a true daimyo. Naruto leaned in while Koyuki tilted her head up and stood on her toes. Slowly closing his eyes, the last thing that Naruto saw was Koyuki doing the same. "Naruto Taicho." A voice rang out, causing him and Koyuki to jerk away from each other as if they'd been standing next to a paper bomb. "What is it, Azumo?" Naruto asked, hiding his scowl. "We've just received a letter from Konoha. It's addressed to you," Azumo said, holding out a letter. Frowning, Naruto took the letter and undid the clasp holding it closed. Reading the contents, he felt a sudden sense of exhaustion well up inside of him. "What's wrong?" Koyuki asked. In response, he handed the scroll off to Koyuki. It was technically a breach in protocol to reveal something that was meant for his eyes only, but since everyone would know about it soon, he didn't see the problem. Koyuki read the scroll and gasped. "It seems Konoha had some problems while we were away." Naruto wore a mirthless smile. They had gathered. Pain looked down at the people who'd come at his behest. He saw the headbands of numerous shinobi villages, Takigakure, Getsugakure, Hoshigakure, Ishigakure, Shimogakure, and many others. All of them were looking up at him, waiting for him to inform them of why he'd asked for this meeting. He stood on the balcony of his headquarters in Omegakure. The rain didn't pour that day. He had stopped it for this meeting, though that did not mean that he wasn't keeping an eye out. His eyes saw more than anyone present could have expected. Since the founding of the hidden villages, 5 villages in particular have stood at the top, Pain started. Konoha, Kumo, Kiri, Iwa, and Suna. These 5 villages, which have been known as the 5 greatest hidden villages, have not only stood at the top, but they have trampled the smaller villages, like yours, underfoot. Pain paused, listening to the way the shinobi down below him muttered. They were discontent. That was good. For decades now, the minor hidden villages have been trampled on by wars waged by the 5 great nations. We've suffered more casualties than anyone else, not because we took part in their wars, but because we were in the way. Our people have been butchered, caught in the crossfire between the uncaring shinobi villages who speak of peace but wage war. The discontent mutterings grew. He could see it on their faces, the anger at their situation, their rage at the 5 great nations. He would turn that rage into a bonfire of hatred, and then he would forge that hatred into a sword, which he would wield at the 5 great nations. However, the time of the 5 great nations is coming to an end. Less than a week ago, I destroyed Kumogakure no Sato. His proclamation was not met with silence, but with more whispering. No doubt they knew this already. If one man can destroy a single hidden village, then what could an army do? If one person can defeat one of the most powerful nations ever, then what could we do if all of the minor villages band together? He could see the way they responded to his words. Some were nodding, others appeared contemplative, still not on board but willing to listen. That was fine. By the end of this night, every one of these people would join him, or they would die. Shibuki never could have imagined that something like this would happen. Unlike the others, who'd been swept up in the euphoria that Pain's word shad caused, he was calm enough to understand that this man only spoke half-truths. It was true that the 5 great nations often waged war. It was also true that the minor nations and villages were sometimes caught up in these wars. However, just as there were 2 sides to every coin, so, too, was there another side to this story. While the great nations waged war, they also helped the smaller villages, even going so far as to risk themselves for the safety of those they were allied with. Takigakure's alliance with Konoha was a prime example of this. Despite having once sent an assassin after their first Hokage, Konoha had helped his village many times in the past, especially recently. Of course, the others weren't interested in hearing this truth. They only cared about what this meant for them. Prestige. Power. Many smaller nations wanted the power that the 5 great nations wielded. When Pain ended his speech, asking those gathered to join him in his righteous crusade to crush the 5 great nations, a raucous cheer went up from everybody present, everybody except Shibuki. I need to warn Konoha about this. After Pain's speech, Shibuki traveled to his hotel, which was where all of the foreign shinobi were staying. He'd ignored them as they spoke in tones of hushed excitement. All of these people were fools. A person like Pain clearly didn't care about the other nations. Whatever his plans were, whatever his goal was, it was clear to Shibuki that he was only using minor nations for his own purposes. Entering his room, Shibuki quickly packed all of his belongings. The 2 ninja that he'd brought with him stood vigilantly by his side. "Are we leaving so soon?" Yoro asked. He was a tall man, and one of his village's stronger jonin. Shibuki also trusted him with his life. Would it not draw suspicion for us to leave early like this? It might, Shibuki admitted. But if we don't leave now and inform Konoha about what's happening, then we may never get another chance. Should we really inform Konoha about this, though? Asked the other jonin that he'd brought. Wouldn't it be better if we didn't inform them? Shibuki paused. Slowly, he turned to Kegan, whose face remained impressively blank. He didn't get angry, but considered Kegan's words for what they were. What do you think would happen if we went to war with the 5 great nations? You mean the 4 great nations, Kegan pointed out. Kumogakure has been destroyed. Our spies have confirmed that. Very well. What would happen if we went to war against the remaining 4 nations? Kegan took several moments to consider the question. I imagine that many of us would end up being destroyed in the fight. Also, it would be even worse for us, because our Jinchuriki is under the protective custody of Konoha, who currently has powerful shinobi such as Tsunade Senju and Naruto Namikaze. That's right. Our position is untenable. Even if I agreed with Pain, which I don't, our village would suffer greatly. Besides, this man calling himself Pain is a member of Akatsuki. Not only did Akatsuki attack our village to try and abduct Fu, but they had also recruited Kakazu, the most reviled missing ninja from our village. Kegan and Yoro stiffened at the name. Kakazu was one of their village's greatest failings, a shinobi who'd held much promised but was exiled after failing to kill the first Hokage. Many people of their village hated Kakazu for his failure, but Shibuki knew that it was their own failing which had resulted in Kakazu's betrayal. Neither of his jonin argued with him after that. After he'd packed everything, Shibuki and his 2 jonin waited until nightfall to leave. They slipped out under the cover of darkness and slowly made their way through a megacure. Large structures of steel towered over them on all sides, which did little to block out the rain that now poured down on them. The dull gleam of cold steel combined with the gloomy sky gave Shibuki a bad feeling, but he ignored it and pressed on. As they reached the halfway point, Shibuki's danger sense, which had been prickling at the back of his mind, suddenly went haywire. He, Kegan, and Yoro leapt back when something crashed into the ground before them. A pained grunt caused him to snap his head toward Yoro. His eyes widened when he saw his shinobi being impaled by a metal rod from behind. Not only that, but Kegan was lying on the ground, motionless, and had someone standing over him, holding something wispy and ethereal in their hand. The 2 figures both had the same Rinnegan eyes that Pain did. Damn it. Who are these 2? Shibuki began making hand seals for one of his signature jutsu. Unfortunately, he would never get to cast his technique. The last thing he heard were the words, Bansho Tenon. The last thing he saw was the wall rushing to meet his face. And that concludes part 7 of this story. Thank you for spending your time here at Ichiraku Ramen and listening all the way to the end. Your support helps keep these stories alive and allows the Shinobi world to continue through new adventures and alternate timelines. If you enjoyed Namikaze's return, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future stories. Once again, full credit goes to the Engulfing Silence, the original writer of this story. If you would like to read the original version, you can find the link to the story in the description below. Let me know in the comments what story you would like to hear next. Until the next time, stay safe, and I'll see you again at Ichiraku Ramen.